All right, it's 9:02. Let's call this meeting to order and start with the roll call. Commissioner Johnston.
Commissioner Johnston, present.
Commissioner Forcell.
Commissioner Forcell, present.
Commissioner Scharf.
Present.
Commissioner Siegel.
Present.
Commissioner Smith.
Present.
Commissioner Danaher, present. And Council Liaison Allison Cormack.
Here.
All right. So we'll take it away. Did anybody show up with any or log in with any oral communications from the public? None. We'll move on. Were there any comments on the minutes from the last meeting?
I had one comment.
Please.
On page 6, it says that Commissioner Siegel was comfortable with a 3% rate increase. And then it says, even though she would prefer a higher rate increase. And you can strike that. That wasn't what I said. So you can strike that rather than trying to put the context around it would be more accurate.
Oh, just strike the second half of that sentence.
Correct.
Even though, okay.
Correct.
Any other comments on the minutes? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes with that edit?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor, just raise your hands. All right, it's unanimous. Thank you. Any revisions to the agenda? No? Okay.
Excuse me, Chair Danaher.
Yes.
In the other meetings, it has been necessary that there be a roll call vote on everything. So
Okay.
I'll just say that raising hands is not sufficient. You do need an audible. You don't actually need to see the person, but you do need to hear their voice vote.
All right. So thank you, Allison. On that, then for approval of the minutes with that edit, Commissioner Johnston?
I vote aye.
Forcell?
Yes.
Scharf?
Yes.
Siegel?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Danaher, yes. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. That was good advice. All right, in your reports from commissioner meetings and events. Anybody been to an event of any kind since the last meeting? Probably not.
I will participate, Chairman Danaher. So last week, Commissioner Jackson and I joined the City Council Finance Committee to discuss the budget and the recommendations that had gone through so far, as well as to discuss the city's planning with respect to what was previously approved in the March 2020 with respect to the sale of Bucket 1 Recs by the city of Palo Alto. We asked that the Finance Committee consider taking a look at the sale of Bucket 1 Recs again during that meeting. It was a great meeting.
Yeah, and thank you for that. Yeah, you're correct in your notes that that's been discussed but never driven to any conclusion or recommendation by the UAC. And we're going to get to it when we talk about the budget recommendations later on this meeting. So thank you for bringing up that issue again with the Finance Committee. Any other reports? All right. So we'll go to Utilities Director report. Dean?
Good morning, Chair Danaher, Commissioners. Thank you very much. So I have a few items that I'd like to discuss. So just some updates real briefly here is that utility rate assistance and payment relief for residential and commercial customers. When the COVID-19 shelter in place and health orders took effect, utilities expanded their payment relief and rate assistance programs to help our residents and our commercial customers. We wanted to ensure that the light and stay and water continues to flow. Customers experience financial challenges during this time. The city proclamation of the local emergency in March instituted a memorandum on disconnections of non-payment and late fees and full bill payment requirements. Customers can make partial payments without any penalties and without any risk of disconnection of the non-payments. The total of missed payments, except late fees, which will be waived entirely, will continue to be owned by customers and eligible for expanded payment plans up to 18 months. Residents can qualify for rate assistance programs by providing a 25% discount on gas and electric, and charges and 20% discount on storm drain fees. Both the resident and commercial customers can equalize their monthly payments into 12 equal amounts. Our bill payment plan through helpful resources of Project Pledge, which allows commercial and residential customers in good standing with their own accounts to donate funding on a one-time reoccurring basis to help residents in Palo Alto. Residents who are struggling to pay their utility bills may apply for this program, and it's a one-time assistance. And the details on wishing to donate for this program can be found at thecityofpaloalto.org/Project Pledge. Utility customer service can also help answer any type of questions in the payments, reliefs, and assistance programs. Customer support is available through the call center at 650-329-2161, or they can also go on my CPAU online customer service, or they can email our customer service directly by going to utility customer services at cityofpaloalto.org. So we've continued the outreach, has stepped up the outreach for financial assistance programs and the event to get the word out to anyone that's needing this help during these difficult times. This information is being shared through the community on email updates, email blasts, Facebook, utilities, cityofpaloalto.org coronavirus website as well. And then some modifications to the utility program in accordance with the county lifting restrictions on construction activities. Some energy efficiency programs are resuming. Examples are around this is including commercial energy efficiency programs, solar installations, EV charger installations, and other work that does not require staff or consultants to visit inside occupant residents or dwellings. That county construction protocol must be followed though. So large projects in spaces over 20,000 feet require a setup of protocols to be followed again by going on to the coronavirus document that can be found on the website, as well as some small projects that are below the 20,000 square foot in their building area. Although all the visits inside the occupancy residence dwellings are temporary on hold, many utility programs have been modified to continue to provide value to the community. The home energy efficiency, one of the Palo Alto's most popular offerings, is available by phone consultants. Also too is that we're still doing recycling on the refrigerators by just leaving it on their curbs. Customers can join a waiting list for our low income and multiple family energy assistance programs. And then also our heat pump water heaters may be installed if there's a health or safety issue caused by the lack of a working gas water heater. There's also water conservative activities administered by the Valley Water that are also available through the do-it-yourself water serving kits, which can be mailed to customers and accessible online. Customers can also join a waiting list for the WaterWise outdoor surveys rebates that do not require pre-inscription measurements, such as weather-based irrigation controller rebates, irrigation equipment, or even rainwater capturing components may be processed and approved without the site visits. A little something else is saving energy and water while sheltering in place. Staff is committed to finding additional ways to innovate, expanding the energy and water rebate programs. So we're looking at other ways that we can actually get more information back out to the public. And then the big thing is that my CPAU is here. We fully launched the new online utility account management system for all the residents and businesses and customers. It offers new features functioning as customers can easily manage their accounts, service online as replaced on the former utility account customer site. And the utility account site has been disconnected at this point. So customers automatically, when they migrate into the My CPAU site, at that point, they would re-sign up then for My CPAU. Our customer service reps are also ready online to help anybody that has any kind of questions that can help direct them to be able to set up their accounts. And with that, I'll conclude my report.
Thank you very much for that. Let's go on to the agenda then. Are there any commissioner comments?
I have a question which I guess falls into the comments, which is there was a small power outage maybe a week or two ago in the community center area. And I was wondering how the partial on-site crew was able, how that worked handling that power outage and whether the rotating crew was impacted the ability to fix that.
So Commissioner Siegel, I don't know. I don't remember that one by what time that actually happened. So was it during the daytime or at nighttime?
I believe it started at about 4:30 in the afternoon and wasn't fixed till about 2 in the morning.
2 in the morning. So that one actually was after hours. So actually the on-call crew came back in and was able to go out and work on that. If I'm not mistaken, I'd have to look at that one again, but I believe it was a transformer that went bad. And so, like I said, the part of the time was response time for the crews to turn around to come back in at that period of time. That was part of the delay on that. And then also, like I said, replacing the transformer that took place.
I'd like to note for the minutes, I should have done this earlier, that Commissioner Jackson joined after the roll call. So let's record him as present. And Don, I think we need a verbal acknowledgement from you that you're present.
I am present, and I apologize for the technical difficulties that delayed my entering into the meeting.
No apologies necessary. We approve the minutes in your absence. So we have no unfinished business. Our first item of new business.
Chair Danaher, excuse me.
Yes, please.
May I add a comment in the commissioner comment section?
Oh, absolutely.
Great, thank you so much. I think some of you know that I'm the representative to Bay Area Water Supply Conservation Agency also. And they've launched something that's great, and I just want to let you all know about it. They're doing virtual landscape classes, and they've been super popular, especially as we're entering summer. I know water conservation is one of the things we all care about. So the way to find them is bawsca.org. And then on the upper right, click on register for a class.
Oh, okay. Excellent.
Thank you. And they're free and available to everyone. So.
Okay. Dean, that may be something that's worth highlighting in one of the utility bill notices that goes out.
Absolutely. Yes, I think that we can get that back out on the website as well too.
Okay.
Blast on that.
Excellent, especially with people at home. It beats doing the actual hard work of landscaping, so that's good. Let's go on to agenda item number 1 then, which is discussion of the COVID health emergency and the city's response. Dean?
So I'm going to try to share a screen here real quick. As you saw, all of you received a presentation, but there's only one piece that I wanted to get to. Are you able to see the screen?
No.
No.
At least
Okay.
I'm not, maybe others are.
You hit share screen. Where's your Zoom? Oh, it's right there. So you're sure. How about now?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so following county shelter in place health orders, as everybody knows that this past Monday, there were some new orders that were put in place. And some of the relief portion of it, it was some curbside pickups that were put in place. They were able to open up some of the restaurants a little bit more on that portion about the relief and the rate assistance programs already. One of the things that they recommend is that face covering required when out in public. especially around essential businesses, on public transit. Not so much if you're just out running or if you're going to be walking outside. It's mostly around when you're in large crowds. Still making sure that the 6-foot social distancing is put in place. A little bit about what's going on from a utilities perspective is that we brought back central staff from the operations teams on May the 11th, which was this past Monday. So we don't have rotating shifts any longer with our operational crews. So everybody is in. We are doing symptom checks before reporting to work, which we had been doing in the past on the rotating shifts. We've also staggered shifts. So instead of bringing everybody back all at 6:30 in the morning, we're actually bringing folks in at 6:30 and 7:30. So we've staggered those crews. We've kept the rotational folks together. So the folks that were working 1 week, those crews are working together as we brought everybody back so that we didn't intermingle everybody back in new crews and being around new people. So we are making sure that our folks are wearing the proper PPE when they're out in the field, which is including all face coverings. And we've also brought back the full meter readers activities. So in the past, as I mentioned, is that we were estimating about 25,000. We brought back all the meter readers as of the same day on the 11th, and that they are doing full routes at this period of time. Again, wearing their proper PPE when they're out in the field with that. So right now, we have, the numbers have changed. Before we had about 78 folks that were actually working on site, and that's jumped to 122. And we still have 93 folks that are still working remote at this point. And again, those numbers from the 122 are just from the operational crews. We still are rotating our customer service folks. Half of them are working from home, and the other half are working from the office here. Engineering has a few extra folks that came back in just because of the construction work that was allowed during the shelter in place. So we do have 2 contractors working on CIP where the inspectors actually came back. So we have 3 inspectors that came back within that 122. So with that, I just wanted to give a quick update on what we're doing from a utilities perspective. Michael, you're on mute. Sorry.
Thank you for that. Questions from any commissioners or from Councilmember McCormick? All right. Then let's go on to the next agenda item. Dean, do you want to take it away?
Try to get rid of this screen. Sorry.
Okay.
Turning this off.
Okay. So the next one is about goals and key actions relating to the SCAP action plan. So it's been an interesting topic for us.
Jonathan, are you going to take this over?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Assistant Director of Resource Management, Jonathan Abendschein. And we wanted to bring this discussion to you tonight to give you a chance to weigh in on the sustainability and climate action plan goals and key actions. We spoke with the council about this in April, and that discussion was led by the sustainability team, but utilities is heavily involved in the carbon reducing, or in fact, in the carbon reducing elements of the sustainability and climate action plan, particularly ones related to electric vehicles and buildings, reducing carbon emissions in buildings. And so we're also collaborating closely with the mobility team. when we spoke to the council in April, there was a feeling that we hadn't really captured a set of goals and key actions that would actually achieve the community's 80% by 2030 goal. And there was a request to come back to the city council on June 8th with an amended set of goals and key actions. Utility staff and the sustainability team and staff throughout the rest of the city are working to develop those goals and key actions. We don't have them for you tonight. They're still in process, but we wanted to get some feedback from the Utilities Advisory Commission on what sorts of goals and key actions you see would be useful or potentially productive in achieving those goals. Now, I think what we're looking for are technically feasible ideas, and they may be expensive or difficult or impactful to the community, but we really want to get all ideas out on the table and give the council an opportunity to decide what appetite they feel the community has. We have our sustainability team here. Phil Bobel and Christine Luong. And Christine Luong will be delivering a presentation for you tonight. And we have a number of utility staff available here to answer any questions. And so I'll turn it over to Christine right now, and she'll deliver that presentation.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Good morning, commissioners. I'm gonna just share my screen. One moment, please. Okay. Okay, are you all able to see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So as Jonathan provided very good background for this presentation, what we're hoping today is to provide you a brief overview of the 2020 Sustainability and Climate Action Plan, which we also call the SCAP update process, and then seek UAC's input on our 2020 SCAP goals and key actions. And some of you who have participated in this process have probably heard parts of this presentation many times, so I apologize in advance for being repetitive. But to provide a little context and background, we currently have a sustainability and climate action plan that's made of 3 components. The first component being the 80 by 30 goal to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 80% relative to our 1990 baseline by 2030. This was adopted in April 2016 and is 20 years ahead of California's goal of 80 by 50. We also have a sustainability and climate action plan framework, which was adopted in November of 2016. So council adopted the goal and the framework, but not the entire plan. So we actually don't have a council adopted entire SCAP. And then because we don't have a full approved SCAP, we have a 2018 to 2020 Sustainability Implementation Plan, which we used to call the SIP, but because of shelter in place, we're no longer calling the SIP. So the Sustainability Implementation Plan was accepted by Council in December of 2017. So that's the roadmap that we've been using to date to direct our sustainability work. Also, this year in 2020, our council priority is sustainability in the context of climate change. And for our 2020 Sustainability and Climate Action Plan, we are recommending 7 focus areas: energy, mobility, electric vehicles, water, climate adaptation and sea level rise, natural environment, and zero waste. And while all of the goals related to those 7 areas are important, we're focusing today mainly on, the goals related to energy, mobility, and electric vehicles are the areas that are key to getting us to our 80 by 30 goals, because they have the highest potential greenhouse gas emissions reduction potential. So staff looked through several different documents. We reviewed the 2030 comp plan, the 2018 sustainable implementation plan, the 2018 zero waste plan, the urban sustainability directors network greenhouse gas high impact practices list, and the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance Game Changers list to get ideas for goals and key actions that we put forth for community input. And just so you have a snapshot, these are the 7 areas in the SCAP, in the proposed 2020 SCAP. Each of the areas has a working group, and each working group is led by the individuals listed here. It's a true interdepartmental effort. We have lots of different departments represented, and I think it's a great way to have cross collaboration on these efforts. So this is a very familiar graph that most of you have seen many, many times. So it's showing our overall greenhouse gas emissions relative to our 1990 baseline, with 2005 also as a point of reference. And as you can see, each of the different colored bars represents a different area of emissions. The red is our largest remaining source of emissions, which is road transportation. And then the blue, the dark blue is natural gas. And so we do show, because we do currently purchase natural gas offsets, we show the sort of crossed out blue, which represents our natural gas offset purchases. However, as you can see, that makes a huge difference in our emissions. So if we don't count natural gas offsets, then our emissions are down about 36%, and road transportation accounts for 64% of our remaining emissions, and natural gas use represents about 32% of our remaining emissions. If we do count offsets, which we've heard repeatedly from the community that they don't think that we should count offsets, then our emissions are down about 56%. And our largest remaining sector of road transportation would be 94% of our remaining emissions. So this is our 80 by 30 target. We want to get down to about 150,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent, which means that between now and 2030, we have to reduce about 300,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. And as you can see, since I'm not counting natural gas offsets in that calculation, our natural gas offsets our natural gas consumption hasn't really changed much since 2013. So that's something that we're working on with our proposed goals and key actions for the 2020 SCAP. So we have a proposed process for the 2020 SCAP update. As I mentioned before, the blue shows the work that staff and consultants are doing, and we have drafted the goals and key actions for community input. And concurrently, our consultant AECOM is calculating our 2019 greenhouse gas inventory. We also have a large focus on community engagement. We were supposed to have an in-person workshop on March 31st, but obviously because of the guidance from Santa Clara County to shelter in place, we structured what was supposed to be an in-person community engagement workshop to a 8-part on-demand virtual attended. Thank you for participating in our workshops. We had 204 people participate in that on-demand workshop. Most people attended the overview, and then the next most attended was energy, followed by electric vehicles, and then mobility. So there was a lot of interest. We received. So this was something that was definitely top of mind for a lot of folks. So we are continuing our online engagement efforts, and we are also bringing forth today to you some of our goals and key actions. As Jonathan mentioned, we are going to be going back to council on June 8th. They have requested that we provide them the updated goals and key actions. We are in the process of updating the goals and key actions based on those 109 pages of feedback from the community. We're going to bring that to council on June 8th so they can review it before it goes to AECOM for impact analysis. AECOM is going to conduct an impact analysis that will break down the costs of all the proposed key actions, the potential greenhouse gas impact, the co-benefits, and any other factors that we need to consider when we make our decision on the final package to bring to council for approval. And we also have many touch points with council along the way, which is something that is slightly different from the last go around. As you can see there, we have currently scheduled 5 different opportunities for council feedback on this process. And another thing that is different this time around is that we are going to do secret review of the SCAP, and we hope that by doing it this way, we'll have one package with secret review that can be approved by council, as opposed to having that 3-part SCAP that I discussed before. So what we are hoping to get from the commissioners today is sort of your feedback on the goals and key actions that we should consider to reach our 80 by 30 goal. And also, I believe in your packets, there is a list of the draft goals and key actions related to energy, electric vehicles, and water. So our next steps, as I mentioned, we are going to council on June 8th. The 2019 greenhouse gas inventory will be completed, as well as the business as usual forecast that will be hopefully completed by the end of June. The AECOM impact analysis will begin as soon as council gives us their blessing on the goals and key actions. And then we are going to return to UAC, the Parks and Recs Commission, and the PTC to get their input as well in the early fall. And then we are going to go back to council to review the 2019 greenhouse gas inventory, the business as usual forecast, the impact analysis, and all the community input received to date, and then present the package of options to get us to 80 by 30. We had hoped to host an in-person 2020 SCAP Summit in the early fall. It looks like that will most likely have to be another virtual event. So we're trying to figure out how to do that. Since the last SCAP Summit we had hosted had about 500 people. So we're trying to figure the logistics of that out. And our pre-COVID plan was to have the draft of the SCAP completed by the end of 2020, and for the secret review and the adoption by Earth Day-ish that should be 2021, apologies. And like I said, we started this process before the pandemic hit. So there are some things that we may have to adjust. For the next 2 years, we may have to focus on the lowest cost actions as opposed to the highest greenhouse gas impact actions. And after that time, we'll probably have to look into different funding mechanisms to get the more aggressive and higher impact greenhouse gas reduction key actions implemented. Thank you.
Christine, thank you for that. Well, a couple questions on the calendar. You've got several study sessions for council. Are those separated by topic areas?
No. So the next one, so we've already did the info report, and we already did the April 13th study session. The the June 8th council meeting will be to review the updated goals and key actions. And then the one in the fall will be to review the impact analysis, as well as the entire package of proposed key actions that we hope to bring to the community for further discussion at the summit. And then the final council meeting will be hopefully when they adopt the final package.
All right, so thank you for that. If you go back to the slide you had up a moment ago with that one. If we could ask that impact analysis be, generally we get materials the week before the meeting. If that could be made available to the UAC as soon as you have it, so people have more time to study it, would be useful. And also, as you have your next draft, if it's possible to get that more than a week in advance of the commission meeting, I think that'd be very helpful. And one final question, that AECOM impact analysis, so that'll show dollars per ton of carbon avoided. Is that the impact, the intent?
Correct.
Okay. And will it also show, we have this big usage of natural gas, but it's not broken down by residential versus commercial, or by water heating versus home heating. And so it's hard to evaluate how much you put into electric water heaters and the like without seeing that breakdown. Will that be part of the impact analysis too?
Yes.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So did you have more on this, or do we go into discussion?
That's all I had, unless Shiva or Jonathan had additional items to add.
All right. Jonathan, anything from you? Yes, go ahead.
No, I think we're simply ready to start the discussion.
All right. Well, commissioners, whoever wants to start off with thoughts, please go ahead or raise your hand. Don Jackson, you went off mute. You ready to start?
Yes, I am. Regarding the energy goals, I would suggest that that council and everyone sort of decide if complete electrification of Palo Alto is a goal at some point in the future or not. And if it is, to state that, and that it's a consequence, to make a strong statement that over the fullness of time in support of that goal, there will be no natural gas, and we will not be selling natural gas. So, I mean, that would be a big thing to state, but I think that if that is the goal, it should be explicitly stated, and there should be thoughts that over 5, 10, 15, 20 years, that it's not going to be 5, that we're going to phase out. So I would make that much more explicit than it is now. The other thing I would say is that in terms of the replacement for things like water heaters, I think the proposed actions are not strong enough. I would propose that we consider banning any new installations of natural gas-based water heaters, new installations of gas-based HVAC, gas-based dryers, things like that. I know that would be a more aggressive thing than is currently being proposed. And then I think that in support of the transition from the electrification process of existing residences and buildings is going to be very complicated and expensive. And I think that one of the things that we need to consider is CPAU supporting on-bill financing of heat pump water heaters, heat pump HVACs, induction cooktops, replacements. So those are that's my comments on energy. I have a couple shorter comments on electric vehicles. My question is the second bullet goal was target to facilitate 50% of vehicles owned by low-income households to be EVs by 2030. It's very difficult for me to parse what that goal means. Could someone explain that?
I'll turn to Shiva Swaminathan to speak to that.
Hello, Commissioners. This is Shiva, Senior Resource Planner. So there are two things. So part of the funding we have for electric vehicles come from the Low Carbon Fuel Standard Program. And part of the requirements of that program is to focus also on low-income households and customers. We have and it's for us, and it stipulates starting in 2023 that a large part, close to 50% of the funds which we receive, be devoted towards low-income customers. Now they have left to us how to define what the definition of low-income households are. So we are, Hiromi and myself, along with other members, municipal utility members, are trying the process of defining what that low-income household threshold needs to be. And currently we have about 500 customers in our low-income programs, but we anticipate to expand that to maybe 2,000 or 3,000 customers potentially. And amongst that segment of our customer base, trying to have at least 50% of them own and drive electric vehicles is the objective of that goal. Does that answer the question?
I guess so, yes. I think that my concern about that goal, the way it's stated, and the goal above, which is just a general increase in number of EVs, is that it's not clear to me how the city directly can affect either of those numbers. Now, I think that the things that we can and should be doing is to facilitate, to ensure the availability of EV charging to low-income households, people who live in low-income households, and people who live in multi-dwelling units. I think that's a goal that I mean, people, I don't know that Palo does not be buying people cars, okay? But we can motivate, we can put in EV charging, we can help and assist in EV charging in places where people don't have EVs today and would like to have them if they had charging facilities. So I think increasing the clarity of those goals around things that are actually actionable by the city, I think would be an improvement. That's my comments there.
Very good. Thank you.
Commissioner, I think you're hitting on one of the biggest challenges that we see in the 80%, achieving the 80% by 2030 goals. And it's something that we've been wrestling with. And I think we'd like to see feedback from the commission on how we ought to be approaching this. I think we, as a utility, can develop plans. We can develop plans and really facilitate the implementation of EV charging. We can help fund incentives for people to buy electric vehicles, but you can't do things like you can with appliances. You can't implement mandates with respect to vehicles, or it's tougher to find what mandates you would implement with respect to vehicles. And with vehicles being two-thirds of the 80 by 30 goal, it means there's a particular challenge there that we're wrestling with, and we would love to have ideas.
One other thing I wanted to state on the energy side, on the key actions, it was listed as an action to implement an all-electric utility rate. I strongly support that key action goal.
Don, thank you for those comments. Who'd like to go next with comments?
I'll take a moment if you don't mind, Chairman.
Please.
In addition to Commissioner Jackson's comments, of which I agree with, I'd just like to focus on, Jonathan, something that you just highlighted. And in reading the report, it appears that with respect to mobility-related measures, we need an additional 118,000 metric tons of CO2 emissions reduced. as you say, 2/3 of the goal. That's a big target. And right now, based upon where we're at and based upon new rates that have been approved, will be implemented, and assuming that the current rates remain in place for the next 2 to 3 years, how is the utility department poised to implement some of the mobility related measures that you have already defined as opportunities? And I guess that's a question both for Dean and for Jonathan.
Well, I'll turn to Shiva Swaminathan again to speak to the current programs that we're rolling out and the areas that we're focusing on for to support people who are buying EVs.
Sorry, could you repeat that question again? How does the EV program impact the mobility?
No, Shiva, I appreciate that. So you highlighted that by 2023, based upon the funding source that you currently have, 50% needs to be dedicated to low-income individuals or families yet to be defined, with a target of roughly 2,000, I think was the height, right? So back of the napkin math, 2,000 impacted, even if all 2,000 impact and all 2,000 go to electric vehicle and all 2,000 get a vehicle charger, we're still not near 118,000 metric tons of CO2 emissions. So right. With respect to that, so that's one portion, right? The other portion is how do we get to the 118,000 metric tons from mobility related initiatives?
So just as a broader picture, we're talking in terms of metric tons of numbers. Currently, it's 300,000 metric tons is what's associated with transportation, and 80% of 300,000 is 240,000. So we're talking that's a scale. But I think when we come up with these goals, so of the 300,000 metric tons of transportation-related goals, about half is residents doing business traveling within the city. That's about 5%. 45% of the emissions is related to vehicles leaving town, doing their commute from by residents. So the residents is about 50%. The other 50% is outside commuters driving into town. So that's what the 300,000 is made up of. So the goal is more like reduce 240,000 metric tons out of the 300. And I think Commissioner Smith, I think you are probably referring to the residential sector only.
Actually, I think the residential, I wanted to focus specifically on mobility, EV charging in particular, both in city as well as those who are traveling into and out of the city of Palo Alto. Right. But to your point, thank you for clarification on the total reduction. I think it just draws special focus on the amount of emission reduction we need to get to. Right. It is substantially, it's high, it's large.
Yes. So we are in terms of mobility. So we are working closely with the mobility team, which is planning and public works, on mobility related topics. But broadly, so we do recognize that EVs is a subsector within the mobility, reducing vehicle miles travel. So how we are defining it is that 300,000 metric tons is 1 billion vehicles miles traveled, VMTs, by the community and outside agencies. So how do we reduce the VMT of gasoline powered vehicles down to 80%? So there are kind of, broadly, I would categorize it like 5 types of, again, so let's talk about residents versus outside parties. And the approach is very different for the 2 segments. For outside parties driving in commute vehicles, the mobility team, the planning folks have the TDM. What does TDM stand for now again?
Transportation demand management.
Thank you, Christine. So transportation demand management measures, which works with the businesses to come up with transportation related strategies. So there's a lever there, call it a lever, where the city can pass rules or mandates through the TDM mechanism is one impacting outside parties driving in. The second one is some of our funding. For example, right now we have a $2 million dedicated to encouraging EV charging in the commercial sector. Again, our budget for EV charging in general is over the next 3 years is about $8 million, all of it pretty much coming from the state's low carbon fuel standard funding. And commissioners, we have seen back in September, a allocation of where we plan to spend those funds, mostly dedicated towards multifamily residential, not-for-profit and mixed use. So again, going back to the two things, the TDM is that one lever we as a city have. Funding we get from the state, we're trying to deploy it for commercial customers. And then encouraging travel, telecommuting is another strategy, which the city can pass potential rules and just apply for ourselves too. So that's on the commute side. On the residential.
Can I just stop you on the commute side really quickly? Just a question. If we are receiving $8 million from the state over the next, is it 4 years? I'm sorry?
Yeah,
4
3 to
years.
4 years. Yep.
Given the state of the current finances in the state of California, how secure are we that that $8 million will come through?
So out of the $8 million, about $4 million is already in the bank, as it were.
Okay.
So we have it within our control. The amounts of funds we get is a function of vehicles miles traveled by electric vehicles. That's how the regulation works. So yes, to the extent the VMT of electric vehicles reduce, the funding source will be lowered. But yes, it is uncertain, but the value stream is, this regulation lasts to 2030. And so we anticipate a steady revenue stream, approximately between $2 to $3 million per year for the next till 2030 at least. Yes, it's likely to dip given this situation, given the VMTs associated with electric vehicles coming down. It has come down about 60–70% is what the data suggests. But so yes, the $2 million would drop by that amount, 60–70%. But we have $4 million in the bank already. And then as it rebounds, the source will become more stable.
And just one follow-up question to that. You had stated earlier on the 2023 requirement that 50% of that $4 million in the bank, or that which is coming in at that point, I guess, that which is coming in at that point?
Correct. From that point forward.
Right. Okay. So from fiscal year 2023 or from calendar year 2023?
It's calendar year. It's 22 or 23. I forget now. I think it's calendar year 2023.
So 50% of that goes to low income thereby. So if it's at $1 million, roughly, based upon a 60 to 70% theoretical, $500,000 from 2023 going forward. So over the next 6 years to 2030, right?
Yep.
$500,000 per year. Okay, fine.
Yep.
And on the residential side, sorry, there were other aspects.
Yes. So on the residential customer segment, you could break the residential customer segment into two. One is multifamily, the other is single family homes. We have 15,000 single family homes and 10,000 multifamily homes. In the process of, and we have currently 4,500 vehicles, and we know there is a dearth of chargers in the multifamily home, and there is the split incentives of who is going to install. Is it the apartment owner or the condo association? So we are targeting, so our bulk of our funds, the $4 million which we have in the bank currently, is we're trying to target for the multifamily and mixed use properties. And whereas the single family homes, the incentives are aligned, right? I mean, you park in your own home, you put your own charger. So we're less worried about it. In fact, we are not dedicating any funds to that. And that was based on a community survey we did as well as community engagement we undertook 3 or 4 years ago, where the community came back and said, don't focus on single family homes for electric charging, but mostly multi-family homes. So that's what we are targeting. Now that's on terms of chargers. In terms of incentives, again, another part of that $2 to $3 million going forward is there's going to be a new state-run rebate program currently. Currently, it's about $1,500 to $2,500, but it's income qualified for based on income. But there's going to be a new program called the Clean Fuel Rebate, also funded from this $2 million pot. We are expected to contribute about 20%. So the broader story, so low carbon fuel standard is going forward in 2021 or 2020, 20% of whatever we secure goes towards the CFR program, the Clean Fuels Rebate program. And we send the money to a state-run program, and the rebate is expected to be at the beginning of this or end of this year. The CFR rebate will come into play, and it's expected to range from $1,000 to $2,000 per electric vehicle without any income qualification. So part of that money, so that you could think of that $2 million pot, let's call it for now, 20% goes towards a state-run rebate program, which is not income qualified. Another starting 2023, 50% of the remaining pie. So 20% goes towards the rebate, and the 50% of the remaining 80% to be dedicated towards low income.
900,000.
Okay. So that's kind of the focus. So chargers, rebates, utility fees, reducing utility fees. So for example, a multifamily homes not only provide rebates for chargers, but also if that triggers a utility upgrade, which the customer currently pays, we are trying to fund that as part of that funding too. So not only the rebates to the customer, but not charge for utility fees, which the customer would have otherwise incurred.
So I think we have a lot of programs, and we will have an opportunity at the July UAC to talk about our near-term programs. I think on a maybe to sort of sum it up at a high level, the most straightforward role that the utility can play here is in building out the charging network. We have a number of programs to focus on that right now. We have.
Sorry, can I stop you right there, Jonathan, at a high level?
Please.
And this is a challenge. You would ask for unusual ideas, or ideas even if they're completely off the mark. We do need to increase our charging network across the entirety of the city of Palo Alto. We've done it in our libraries. Now it's time to do it on the streets. Now it's time to do it in the new public parking garages. And literally from an incentive perspective, the city of Palo Alto should take the step forward, because Shiva, thank you so much for taking the time to explain that. But when I look at it from a simple math perspective, we don't have enough money to get to our goal. That's math. And if we need to increase both our incentives for people driving electrical vehicles and our supply of electricity for existing electrical vehicles or future electrical vehicles or population of Palo Alto with electric vehicles, we still need to increase our supply of electrical vehicle chargers, and we just don't have enough money. That is at a high level. So the challenge of 300,000 metric tons CO2 emission reduction becomes a very daunting task.
Agreed.
Thank you for making that point. And I think that that's an issue across not just transportation, but also building electrification as well. There's going to be a need for the community to find an additional funding source that goes well beyond utility bills or surcharges or things like that. And that's something we're hoping to quantify over the course of the next few months.
Brilliant. Thank you.
You ready? Michael?
Thank you, Warren. Greg, I see you're off mute, so can we hear from you, please?
Sure, love to add in a little bit to this. So I think at a high level, I think the first thing I'd like to see us discuss is whether or not the gas offsets, what we really think about that. I mean, staff mentioned that the community doesn't believe that's a real reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So I guess the question is why is it not a real reduction? Is it a perception problem? Is it a real something that's not worth doing? We spend $1.5 million on it. I mean, I'd like to know if we should continue doing that, if we should educate the community and count it if we should do it. You know, so I guess I'd like to hear from staff a little bit about that.
So Greg, this is Dean. So I can talk a little bit just about that. So that was one of the items that we had looked at for capturing and cutting some of the program costs, because you're right, it's $1.5 million. I think at this period of time, it was a recommendation to council that we were going to cut that program because we do. I mean, there's a mixed feeling from the community on this about, does it really should it count the way you count it? Does it really work for us? And so at this period of time, we have it in the budget portion that will be going to get finalized by council to actually cut that program 100% out.
So I saw that. So I guess the question though is, what was happening with that money? I mean, we were taking that $1.5 million buying offsets, and there was carbon reduction going on somewhere else. At least that's the way I understood it. That's what was happening?
So I can speak to this. As far as the actual function of the program, yes, we would buy offsets that were not necessarily approved by CARB, but capable of being approved by CARB. There's a whole additional process that you have to go through to get them actually approved that didn't seem necessary for us. Generally, the offsets are providing funding for things like refrigerant destruction, providing funding to preserve forests, and there are some. So we haven't bought any of these, but there are some offset programs related to reducing dairy emissions as well. We do consider them to be real avoided carbon emissions, but I think, you know, some of the concerns the communities expressed is that it's not sustainable to rely on offsets to achieve your 80% by 2030 goals, and in some ways it distracts the community from the urgency of the problem at hand. I would actually turn to Christine Luong as well, because I know she's had a lot of discussions with community members. I think she would be able to provide some feedback on this.
Sure, happy to. So the overwhelming feedback from the community is that offsets were always meant to be a bridging strategy. So when my predecessor, Gil Friend, introduced the concept of offsets, he always couched them as they're a bridging strategy, that they're an interim step to get to 80 by 30, but he always sold them as not being the be all and end all. They were just a step on the way to get to 80 by 30, and we would come up with other ways to reduce our natural gas consumption and eventually phase out offsets. So that's how he always messaged. Yes.
Why is offset different than RECs? Why is the concept different? The concept seems the same to me. So why are we good with RECs as not a bridging strategy? Why is this? I mean, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, I understand both arguments on both sides of it, right? I mean, I understand, but the point is that we're schizophrenic on it in Palo Alto. I mean, we seem to take and say, okay, well then, Palo Alto is a small island in the world, and we make the argument that we're supposed to lead on it because we influence other people's behavior. there is more than enough carbon emissions out there to offset, to actually reduce worldwide carbon emissions, the US carbon emissions. It doesn't matter if Palo Alto goes to 0 carbon emissions if Sunnyvale doubles their carbon emissions. I mean, it really makes no difference. So what are we really trying to achieve here? And I think that gets into our whole 80 by 30 thing. That's, 10 years from now. First of all, I think we have to ask ourselves, is it realistic or is it aspirational? Are we planning on achieving it in a way that's drastic? And that was your question about, yes, we can require everyone in Palo Alto, we can fine them heavily if they don't own an EV. That'll bring it down. That's not practical. We're not going to do that, right? So, I mean, there are things we could do, but they don't seem practical or realistic on a lot of that. But I also don't think we have the metrics. I'd like to know, there's a big divide between single family and multifamily, obviously. As you said, the incentives are in line for single family, but not multifamily. What are we going to do? What do we have in terms of data? When we put in more incentives, are we getting the single family take up? I mean, single family, what percentage of the people are having EVs in single family homes? Is it where it should be? Is it, because that's clearly not a charging issue if you have a house at a single family home. So what are the roadblocks for people in single family homes to own EVs? And if multifamily became the same as single family due to our incentives and making it easier, do we then get there? I suspect we don't, but we don't know the answer to that. And I haven't seen a roadmap that says that our incentives work, number one, that they're going to put us onto the path. And, I don't think we have a really good plan. And I hear some of the other commissioners saying we need to focus on more incentives and on a granular level do that. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I don't see the overall of where that gets us other than that we continue to just move forward incrementally. And maybe that's what we're willing to do, is just say, well, we have to try and we have to move forward incrementally, but then we don't get there probably. I look at that huge red line on transportation. That's an extremely high line, and it seems, as other commissioners have said, it's a huge amount of carbon to stop. And how do we control who commutes in? And with shelter in place, I know I'm rambling a little bit now, but with shelter in place, we should have some more data about if there is no commute, what does it look like? Are we there? If we're not there right now on what it would look like in carbon emissions, what we're trying to achieve, we're not going to get there with TDM and other things because no one's commuting into Palo Alto. So do we know the answer? Is it not possible to get that data?
So I think you're raising a lot of concerns and questions that we've asked ourselves and that we share. And part of what we're doing over the summer here is to get at a lot of the questions that you're asking right there. The questions about vehicle miles traveled are part of the AECOM analysis and what's needed in terms of both trip reduction and higher electric vehicle penetration. I think we're looking at the things where we're looking at the actions where we do have levers and asking ourselves, what can we do well beyond incentives? Because I agree with you that incentives are not going to get us there. Incentives are a necessary part of the solution. They have a supporting role, but they're not going to get us there on the timeline that you're looking at. And that's part of what the AECOM analysis is going to get us to. It's also part of what we're going to be presenting on June 8th is some ideas that are a little bit more out of the box, a little bit more ambitious. And I'd say that we've been able to make progress in a lot of areas, but this area of trying to get people to buy electric vehicles or get people commuting into Palo Alto to either not commute in or use electric vehicles to commute in, those are places where we have fewer levers. We have some ideas that we're going to share, but we're looking for other ideas from the commission as well. So we share those concerns.
Jonathan, I want to move this along. Lisa had her hand. Greg, are you done, or can we?
Yeah, no, we can move on. I just wanted to raise I really think we need to look at the big picture and then look and see if our incentives are actually causing the change to get us there and how much they're moving us there. And then I also think we really need to think about offsets and if they are actually working. And if they are actually reducing carbon, why are we getting rid of them? And why are we not educating the community? But if they're not working and they're not effective, then I think we have to also ask ourselves in terms of the RECs, which I know we've been doing in terms of looking at the different buckets on RECs.
Can I just point out one thing to that, which is we report every year to the Carbon Disclosure Project on our emissions, and the Carbon Disclosure Project, as well as the ICLEI protocols, they all allow offsets in your greenhouse gas emissions reporting. So they're currently allowed globally. And the other response to your question is the Bay Area Quality Management District just did a study, and they found that since shelter in place, traffic has been down about 50 to 85% in the Bay Area, which is equivalent of about 20 to 30% reduction in CO2e. So.
All right, thank you, Christine. Before I turn it over to Lisa, who had her hand up a while ago, Jonathan and Christine, frankly, it bugs me to say the community says here, the community says this, the community says that. There are individuals in the community who provide points of view, and I respect that and honor that, but I don't want to talk in a way that the community has a single voice, something that we have to respond to. These are just points of view for individuals. But with that off my chest, Lisa, you ready to go?
Yeah, thank you. Good discussion here. Let's see, I'm trying to narrow my comments down to things that haven't already been said. As far as electric vehicles go, yeah, it's really hard to achieve our targets just through incentives. And yes, it's hard to know if what we can achieve through incentives will get us anywhere close to our goals. Just brainstorming a bit on what the city can do and has direct control over, and at the same time leaving aside cost. I observe in private sector and workplace charging, I think companies observe a phenomenon where they build the chargers and then the vehicles come. And so, you know, the goal of ensuring there are adequate numbers and types of EV chargers to support the growing number of EVs, you know, I almost wonder if there's a more assertive way to phrase that and frame the goal of building out public charging in advance of electric vehicle adoption. Because, you know, like I said, on the theory that's been observed elsewhere, that when people see the chargers close to their homes, then they realize that they could probably get an electric vehicle and know that they could charge it. I would also, I'm curious if anybody's ever thought of the city providing a car sharing service, like, the names of them are suddenly escaping me. But the
Zipcar.
Thank you, Zipcar. I kept thinking of the one in San Francisco that was City Car Share, but I think they folded. But anyway, you know, somebody commented we can't buy electric cars for people. But car sharing is a really interesting mobility service, and that provides a lot of opportunity to manage the charging and recharging of vehicles. And again, setting aside costs, setting aside staff time, it could be a way to provide electric mobility to a lot of people who both live and work in Palo Alto, as well as perhaps exploring a partnership with the Ubers and Lyfts, if there was some opportunity to facilitate electrification of those fleets. And finally, on electric vehicles, I'm curious about the key action around electrifying the municipal fleet. And I don't, you know, the answer to this might be AECOM will weigh in on this later, but I'm just curious what kinds of vehicles are in the city fleet. I know we have one electric garbage truck. I realize that police cars that are on the road, I think it's 23 out of 24 hours, something like that, are probably not amenable to electrification at this point. But what types of vehicles are in the city fleet, and what would be the obstacles to electrifying sooner than later?
So in terms of fleet, we have about 700 vehicles in the fleet, and we'll get into the details of it in our discussion on in July, of which about 250 or so are light duty vehicles, which are amenable for electrifying. So the Public Works Department has made a commitment that as these vehicles come to their end of life at a minimum, that the replacement would be an electric vehicle unless there is a compelling reason not to. So that's a commitment they've made. And we think by 10 years, we'll have a lot of turnover, but we are in the process of doing an assessment of what the budgetary impact of that is to bring that forward. But that'll be part of the discussion and assessment in the coming year. With respect to your previous thought about zip cars, we had, Hiromi had this idea, and we approached some of the low-income programs where we could actually fund a zip car parked in low-income property. But some of the property managers in those locations were worried about liability, and they were not quite enthusiastic about that idea. So, but we are still trying to pursue that type of an idea. But that's the
Fair enough.
point.
Yep. I wonder if they, I mean, again, citing them is everything, because it has to be easily walkable from where people live. And I'm curious if there might be some locations that are on city-owned property. And then turning quickly to energy, I'm very intrigued by Commissioner Jackson's comments about just clarifying where do we stand on the electric utility, I'm sorry, on the gas utility, and how much longer do we expect it to be around, and what specifically are our goals with respect to gas use. And in terms of the key actions, I think that exploring electrification of city-owned facilities certainly could be stronger in terms of, you know, if this is in fact what we're trying to do in the city, why not have the action be to electrify city-owned facilities? Again, leaving aside cost, leaving aside the effort involved. But if we can't do it in our own facilities, can we expect other entities to take those actions? Yeah, just wanted to second the all electric utility rate. And finally, I just have a question about, we always talk about the residential sector and the commercial sector. Do we have much of an industrial sector? Are there natural gas uses other than water heating, space heating, appliances? Do we have any industrial processes in the city that use natural gas?
Laundromats.
Laundromats, dryers, sure.
We do have a few industrial processes in the city. I mean, we every year we see fewer and fewer. I think some of the other more challenging uses of gas are in facilities like hospitals, where you need large throughputs of hot water, or other similarly large facilities, and the heat pump technology may not be there to support those large throughputs of hot water. It's possible to do it using electric resistance, but you have major efficiency losses there. But it is a relatively small percentage of overall gas use, and it may not be necessary to electrify 100% of the city to achieve our carbon goals. You may be able to reserve space for some of those major uses.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that information. Yeah, I think that's it for my comments. Thank you.
Let's see. Lauren had her hand up first, Stacy. If y'all want.
Okay.
All right. Let's go with that.
Thanks. I'll just, support a lot of the comments that have already been made, and then just add a few more. On mobility, we have this increase active transportation mode share. A couple things. When it seemed that there were a lot of comments from the community that they didn't understand what it meant. And so I think we want to make sure that the goals are not written in any kind of lingo and are very clear to community members who are maybe, less in the know. And then also thinking about any kind of group transportation option right now. I'm a little concerned that with the pandemic, it's going to be a long time before we see the kind of shared transportation, whether it's carpooling or Caltrain or a bus or anything at any cost, come back to pre-pandemic levels. And I think that's something we should be thinking about when we're considering how we're going to get to these goals. And then one comment that's been raised, but I just want to underscore that, well, actually, before I say that, when I look at the graph, I see virtually no change from 2013, except for offsets. And so I'm wondering if we're missing, I don't know how far we get with it, but if we're missing some efficiency opportunities, or if there's any sense of why there's been so little change, with the efforts we've had to date. It seems like those programs aren't actually having a big impact on the CO2e. Yeah.
So I can speak to that a little bit. We have, we do have, so the programs are not as impactful as we'd like them to be. On the flip side, though, but they are actually having some impact. Certainly, our efficiency programs have had significant impact over the last several years. The challenge is that impact has really only gone towards offsetting load growth in a lot of our utilities. So we need something much more accelerated than what we've been doing.
Okay, that makes sense. So the bigger one, and there's a couple different varieties of this, but it's this idea of what levers do we have? And so when I see the goals and I see how they make sense, if you look at where we need to go and the most logical ways to get there, if you're just looking at emissions, but I would like to better understand, based on the levers we do have, whether we can use those a little more assertively. And so something that might seem a little less productive in terms of emissions reductions could be more so because we have the ability to control it more, or as opposed to incentives. And as we're looking at big budget shortfalls, some of these programs where we might have financial incentives may not be available to us, at least in the short term. 10 years isn't a very long time. So if we have a 2 or 3 year delay for some of these programs, we're really looking at missing the numbers. And then what was the other one? Oh, and then just to emphasize any kind of on-bill financing, any programs we can do where we can spread out the cost, where we can make it easier for customers who want to participate, would be great. The other side to that, which I know we talked about before in some context, but there was this one comment from a community member that really struck me on electric vehicles, who said, I need to be able to plug my car in at my curb. Can I please run a plug to the curb? This is the barrier to my getting an EV. We can't put both cars in our driveway. I'll pay for all of this. You just need to make it permittable. And so I don't know whether that is correct, but there's a perception there. So I just think we should look at all those opportunities we have to make it easier for our customers who are interested in adoption. We've talked about chargers. That's the big one, but even on the permitting side. So you're on mute, Mike.
Thank you very much. Anything else? Okay, then AC, please.
Very quickly, just a couple of comments. I mean, in terms of EV adoption, one of the things that Dean has talked about at various meetings is these group buy opportunities that we have for electric vehicles. And I wonder if there's a way that we could arrange group buy opportunities for members of the community as a way of helping people kind of get over the hurdle of buying an EV. So that's question number one. I don't know if that's something that's feasible.
I can speak to that. So that's something that we actually do right now. Every year we do our sun shares. I think the name has highlighted the solar element of it, but we do have an electric vehicle element of the group buy. So we have some of those opportunities, but I think we'd have to scale them up pretty significantly to accelerate EV adoption the way we're talking about right now.
Well, I would just wonder whether that's something we could think about as a possible action item to increase EV adoption. Although I strongly support all the comments that people have made that a big key is making charging easily accessible to everybody, multi-tenant, people or commuters and whatnot. People are not going to buy EVs if they're not confident that they can charge them in a very convenient place and manner. Next question, just very technical question. I noticed on the energy section, the comments from the public, which I thought were really very useful. There was a repeated comment of possibly using renewable gas, biogas. Is that technically feasible at all? I assume I think we've had a discussion in the past that there were real technical problems with doing that.
It's definitely technically feasible. I think one of the big challenges you have here is that it's extraordinarily expensive. Biogas is already much more expensive than regular natural gas, and there's a limited supply of it. So once you run out of the biogas, then you have to go to things like hydrogen or synthetic natural gas, which are maybe not an order of magnitude more expensive, but quite a bit more expensive and not available to be scaled up yet. So I'll stop there.
Well, that doesn't sound like it should be high on our priority list. Okay, thank you.
Anything else, AC? Okay.
That's it for me.
All right.
Michael,
I've
one
got-
question.
Please.
So Hiromi, did you have anything you wanted to add? I noticed that you were coming back on. No?
Yeah, no, I think it's okay. The group, I was gonna say something about the group buy. This year, for the first time, aside from SunShares, we also participated in something called, hold on, I have a sticker on my computer, Drive Clean Bay Area. And it was a group out of Marin. They invited us in a little bit late, but it was a completely new model that we had never heard of before, where there's a nonprofit organization that started working directly with dealerships and a company that works with all the dealerships. SunShares traditionally only had the Nissan Leaf available at a discount of about $4,000 discount, which was pretty good. But we had very few participants in it. And this other program will be a lot bigger than, it's a big regional effort. And they hope to do it again next year. We'll see how COVID will impact this kind of program though.
I think the key for those kinds of programs is to make sure that there's lots of notice to the community so people can think about it and participate, and getting the word out widely and effectively.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Hiromi. So I have a number of comments which I can go through quickly, but first, Allison, did you want to say anything to the conversation?
Sure, I'll just jump in briefly. This is exactly the type of conversation I was hoping that we could have, which is more in depth with not only our staff experts, but the UAC. I won't repeat many of the comments, but as I continue to grapple with this topic, I think Commissioner Scharf's big questions are things that really are going to have to come to council when staff comes back. Can we do this? Is this target realistic? If so, how much will it cost? And are we willing or able to make that investment? You know, fundamentally, the question of RECs and offsets, are they okay or are they not? They are in many respects in the same category. And if we're okay with cap and trade other places, is that okay for us here? Commissioner Jackson made an interesting comment. We're not going to buy electric vehicles for people. Well, I'll tell you, some of my neighbors asked that. We spent over $2 million just on Ross Road. We could have bought 57 Nissan Leafs. If it cost $2,000 to install a charger, we could have installed 1,000 chargers. These are actually exactly the questions we have to ask, right? This is why the work that AECOM is doing is so important. I appreciate Ms. Lalonde saying at the beginning that energy, mobility, and electric vehicles are the three that are going to get us there. We on council have spent a ton of time on zero waste. I personally spend a lot of time on water. Those things are important, but if we're really talking about greenhouse gases, I'd love us to focus on those three categories. You know, this is the time for us to think creatively. The person who wants to, you know, run a plug out to his curb, not sure how that's going to interact with the sidewalk, but I know we got a bunch of planter boxes here on Ross Road. We could put chargers in them potentially. Like, you know, this really is the time. I also want to emphasize the question about, are we going to continue to sell natural gas or not? That's another big question. So much as I want the details, and that's why, you know, we asked staff to come back in June and spend time with you now. I also want the top level questions really highlighted for us to grapple with, and I know that the UAC will help us with that. So I want us to think about the big level things, and then also the smaller details, you know, on bill financing, all the other things we've talked about. Yeah, fundamentally, this will come down to costs. And you hear that from other council members, right? And so that being really forthright about that, I think is super important. And finally, I want to thank Chair Danaher for clarifying community. We have many members of the community who are super involved, and I see many of them attending right now, and we're grateful for their participation. But there are a lot of people who are just busy doing their day jobs and trying to homeschool their kids and get the house clean and mow their low water lawn if they have one. And I think they continue to believe that we have carbon neutral utilities. So this is a pretty big change we're making in terms of the offsets, and I appreciate Commissioner Scharf highlighting that. In the 27 hours of Zoom meetings last week, it was quite difficult for each of us to think at a high level and respond and get to the details at all the same time. So that's something that I don't know the community actually wants us to do. Something to think about. So appreciate the opportunity and very much appreciate this conversation at this level of detail.
Allison, thank you. That was helpful. So I'll try to breeze through my comments. First, our discussion of mobility has been very car-centric, and we should have in a few years, the majority of our EVs should be e-bikes, scooters, and other things. That really has to be part of our plan. That's a little less within the purview of the Utilities Commission, but it should be that's the most effective way to reduce energy consumption there. That's also a place where group buy may work very well, and it's something that's going to help students or other lower income people better, and works better with multifamily tenants. On that, one theme I want to make is that we do a lot of top-down thinking about this, but there should be a lot of I'll call it crowdsourcing of data and suggestions, because as Allison just said, there's big ideas and then there's details, and the details of what would help me in the way of parking my bike or my e-bike, or what lanes, or what would help me in the way of where I charge my car, and what I would need that. There ought to be something on our website, or simple things for people just to put in lots of data for requests, so we can crowdsource that and know where we can solve the pinch points. And there will be a plethora of form factors, including tricycles and the like, for more senior citizens and people who aren't comfortable on bikes, but that should be a big part of our planning. On EVs, it very much is about chargers. I know we have some ways of tracking this. I think it should be a 20-second line item, or something, at least, if not in the monthly, at least in the quarterly report from utilities, on how many public chargers do we have, how many in multifamily dwellings, and just so we can see where it's been quarter by quarter by quarter. It doesn't require discussion, but if you track it, people tend to pay more attention to it. We should look more aggressively into third parties that will put chargers in and pay for them in the public streets. And again, crowdsource requests for people for what would be helpful. Also want to note, I'm aware of projects that may produce carbon neutral gasoline at competitive prices, and may be available within the next couple of years. So that would change some of our options as well. If we had gas stations in Palo Alto with carbon neutral, affordable gas, but more to come on that. Let me turn to the natural gas sector. I believe in cap and trade as being the most economically sensible approach to reducing carbon. I believe that applies to us as well, and to the offsets. I think we should remember that our carbon footprint is not what we emit in Palo Alto. We outsource a lot of our pollution because the manufacturing of all the goods and the like we buy is done elsewhere, and our data centers are powered elsewhere, and so forth. So as we think about offsets, our emissions are largely outside of Palo Alto. If we're buying offsets, I agree with Greg that should be very viable approach. I think anytime you want to eliminate something, to go to 100% solution in most areas of technology I've seen, that's the most expensive approach. So I'm leery about approaches to say we'll eliminate natural gas. We can look at it and talk about it, but imagine in the most cost-effective way of how we reduce greenhouse gases. We're still going to have natural gas, and we can have offsets for that. And in our next agenda item, we may talk about whether our offsets are high enough, but I think it should be an important part of our policy. I do want to see the cost benefit data and how we break down versus space heating, water heating, cooking, etc. I have a feeling we're not necessarily applying our dollars in the most cost-effective fashion on that. Let me mention a few things that I put in the category of, tools or infrastructure or whatever. On-bill financing is relevant to EVs and to other things, and should be a priority, I think, for us. Automated meter infrastructure is going to give us more tools for controlling, monitoring, controlling, billing, and the like. And that should not be delayed. We're going to get into the budget discussion later on. Fiber to the premises. We're right now, I think, going through beginning of a transition where we change a lot of society, much less in-person retail and more online, much less commute to the office and more work at home. And the Verizon and AT&T are reporting sharp increases in the request for bandwidth, including fiber to the home. And I think we ought to think about accelerating that program. We do bond financing or whatever, because that goes to our carbon footprint. It also goes to the productivity and convenience and the like of our residents. And it's part of this big change that's going on in society, beginning now with the COVID crisis. One other thing on the tools or infrastructure, It's kind of scandalous how bad our permitting process is for people who want to put in solar and other things. That's not within the utilities department, but that's a known problem and should be addressed. There should maybe be metrics tracking efficiency and the like of that. We should not be discouraging contractors working in Palo Alto because we have a holier than thou permitting process. Finally, we didn't talk about water today, but the focus in the program there is about reducing per capita use and the like, and that's well and good. But we also have this valuable canopy. It's mentioned in the SCAP. We have our gardens. We talked in the past about how much more would we pay for, call it insurance sources or otherwise, maybe it's recycled water, to protect our trees and our gardens in Palo Alto, which do of course relate to our greenhouse gas consumption and heating and the like. And I think our water program has to think not just about how do we be more efficient, how do we reuse water, but do we have enough and to be protective of our other resources. And it may mean finding ways to increase our water storage or other water sources, which will be a difficult challenge, but that should be part of our thinking. So those are the comments I had. And I think that finishes this agenda item unless anybody had anything else to add. All right, wonderful. We're going to agenda item 3, and I want to thank Lisa Forsell and Lauren Siegel and the staff. They all worked collaboratively on this report on what really is the footprint of our natural gas and the leaks. So we have a brief report on that. Take it away, Dean or Jonathan, whoever.
So I think Jonathan was going to help us put up the
Slides.
Yes, so I'm working to add that,
Yep.
to bring that up as we speak here.
and
Let's
Jonathan,
see
if,
here.
if you don't mind, can you just go straight to slide number 5, just in the interests of time? And I think we've already some of the things we were talking about already. So, oh, sorry, one back. Yeah. So, yeah, we just wanted to kind of tee up the discussion by making a few points that that we put in the commissioner memo. There's been a lot of discussion already today about Palo Alto's greenhouse gas emissions and the carbon footprint of the natural gas utility. And what got Commissioner Siegel and I kind of interested in this issue can really be traced back to just the way the city does its greenhouse gas inventory. And as Christine Long pointed out, this is a oft-cited chart. And setting aside the question of offsets, in a way this graph captures it nicely, just with shades of blue, but that's the greenhouse gas footprint of our combusted natural gas. But then in this chart, there's this tiny yellow slice accounting for natural gas leakage. And we feel like this does not really paint the full picture of the carbon dioxide equivalent footprint of the natural gas utility. And so we just wanted to raise a few questions about, or a few discussion points. If you can go to the next slide. Actually, the next one after that. So a few observations. One is that the natural gas system in its entirety includes extraction, production, processing, transmission, underground storage, and all the way along the system, the natural gas can leak. And while we do account for leakage in the distribution system, the question is, should we really be also accounting for our greenhouse gas footprint, taking into account the entire system and not just distribution within Palo Alto? And then the other thing that we wanted to raise was, if you can go to the next slide, what we use in the carbon accounting methodology as the global warming potential of methane, which is the main component of natural gas. And the main question is about whether we think about it in terms of a shorter time horizon or a longer time horizon. And in its greenhouse gas inventory so far, the city has used the 100-year time horizon. And our proposal is that a shorter time horizon is the appropriate one to use, given the immediacy and urgency of this problem and the immediacy and urgency of taking mitigation steps and understanding and quantifying the emissions from our natural gas system. And then finally, the last two slides are this is the exact same data as the greenhouse gas inventory, but it's just looking exclusively at the natural gas utility. And this is as reported so far. That tiny yellow slice is now teal, and it's the natural gas leakage just from the distribution system. And to sort of illustrate why this is worth discussing, the final slide is an illustration of, if you can go to the last one, thank you, of what the greenhouse gas emissions footprint looks like if you include upstream leakage and a 20-year time horizon for global warming potential. This assumes 3% upstream leakage. And of course, the graph would be different according to what estimates are made. And we're not taking a position on what the right number is. If the city wanted to start using this type of methodology for thinking about natural gas, I think there would be an exercise for experts to figure out what's the right estimate to use for transmission, storage, production, extraction, et cetera, leakage estimates. So anyway, so that was sort of what we wanted to tee up a discussion with the UAC and the staff and Councilmember Cormack, because we feel like I said, that the implications of including leakage and including 20-year time horizon for global warming potential, they impact the inventory significantly and might then impact the actions that we may or may not want to take as we try to lower the city's greenhouse gas footprint. And I don't know that we need to keep screen sharing, although we can certainly refer back to this as needed.
Lisa, thank you for that. One quick question. When you look at that last slide there in the bar, how much of that impact is from the 3% estimate, and how much is from changing the methodology from the 86 years to the 20 years?
That's a great question. So let's see, I would almost answer that question by going to the graph before, which has, so this is just distribution. And so if we were just changing it to be a global warming potential, it would go from 21 to 86. So that teal bar would approximately quadruple.
Okay.
So that's 4,781 metric tons. It would go to, let me just round that off to 5,000. So it would go to about 20,000 metric tons.
Okay. All right, thank
Whereas if you include both effects, it goes to 158,000 metric tons. So definitely, they're both impactful.
All right, thank you. Any questions from other commissioner members? Discussions? Don?
Yes, I wanted three points I'd like to make. I think this entire presentation is an interesting follow-on from Chairman Danaher's comment in the last agenda item about that we are not accounting for, essentially greenhouse gas emissions that we outsource effectively by, things that we buy that are purchased that are manufactured elsewhere. So I think that's an interesting, it's related to that topic. The other question I had was to staff, which is to what extent, what is the staff impact of reporting on these natural gas emissions for informational purposes? What would be the financial or staff impact of moving in that direction?
So reporting only, if we were to send a report to the utility advisory, an informational report to the utility advisory commission and council, I think it's a modest amount of staff time. We've looked into this a little bit and we think it's doable. I think there's a little bit more work we need to do to really nail down what methodology we'd use and what it would cost us. But I think it is achievable for us with our existing resources.
Thank you.
Lauren, you were off mute a moment ago. Did you have something you wanted to add?
I just wanted to clarify one thing in terms of the 20-year versus the 100-year that Lisa had mentioned, that the 20-year makes more sense because this is an immediate and urgent issue, and that's true. But there's actually also a chemical or scientific reason to use the 20-year, which is the way methane is released into the atmosphere, and it happens in about 12 and a half years, I believe. And so looking at it over 20 years is, I would say, a more accurate way to consider methane emissions. But historically, the EPA has looked at it over 100-year, and I personally think that's just more about convention than actually what makes the most sense.
All right, thank you for that. Greg.
Yeah, so I guess the ask in this memo then is to have this information reported to the UAC and have staff do it. Is that correct?
I think our goal is to raise awareness in the UAC as well as to City Council, and in the community. The distinction is stopping short of reporting out in official, trying to have a reporting requirement to CARB or other agencies. And to the extent that the city of Palo Alto is comparing itself to other cities, to not use a different methodology than the other cities use, because then it wouldn't be apples to apples anymore.
Right. No, I agree with all of that. No, I'm glad you took a measured approach with that, because I think reporting to the city council and reporting to us, if you're going to report, it makes sense. I guess I wanted to ask, to what end, though? We could report on a lot of upstream costs of greenhouse gas emissions. And this clearly shows that, there's a lot of negative effects of natural gas in the production and that on it. But to what end? We've already made a decision that we would like to have less natural gas and go to electrification and move towards that. So and the reason I'm saying this, it's nice information, but one of the things I learned being on the city council was that, and we on the council did this all the time, was ask staff to do one more thing. And it's an incrementally a very small thing, and they always say, staff always says yes. So I'm just going to say staff always says we'll do it. And so I'm just wondering if this is a good use of staff's time, and what information is it giving us that we don't know, since we already made the decision that we would prefer to have less natural gas.
That's a great observation. I think when we started this a few months ago, it was, we were debating the possible action items that could come out of this. One would be upping our purchases of carbon offsets to account for leakage. This feels like the wrong moment of time, given the pandemic and the budget considerations, as well as potentially having a slightly different set of priorities in the action items in the SCAP. Although again, to your point, which is very valid, like the city is doing a lot to reduce natural gas usage. So I don't know how much of a tilt is possible there or feasible. I think we were just coming from a place, having gone through the exercise of redoing the way we do carbon accounting in the electric utility, and how many discussions that took, and how sort of we started with a multi-dimensional accounting change and policy change and, you know, budgetary implications, and looking at everything at once, and sort of how difficult that was to grapple with. We thought, let's go super narrow and just agree on, you know, potentially agree on the right way to do the accounting without immediately going to and hear all the implications of that. But your point is nonetheless well taken. And staff made the point, which is also really valid, about if we're going to look upstream in the natural gas utility, we probably have to look upstream in all the other sources of greenhouse gas emissions as well. And, you know, if they all increase by the same factor, then we haven't learned, you know, then the priority picture doesn't change. If the upstream emissions are much worse in one sector than another, then, you know, maybe it paints a better picture.
So, I mean, I think it's a worthwhile exercise at some point, but to your point, I do think it's sort of the wrong moment in time to be doing all that. And so I guess the question is, would this be something you'd be willing to defer, you know, and we look at it a year from now when the world hopefully will be a different place and we may have more resources and we can look and then figure that issue out?
For me as a commissioner, for sure. I think we had put this on the back burner, and then sort of with all the SCAP discussions and not really knowing what, you know, how the SCAP was being approached. And before we had the insight about upstream emissions from all the other sectors, felt like it was important to kind of have this conversation as part of the SCAP conversation.
Okay.
If I can throw in one other comment, I mean, your point is well taken, Greg, and as Lisa says, the timing was really accelerated because of the SCAP discussion. But one thing you said about that I just wanted to push a little further was the conversation that there's already been a decision to reduce emissions from gas, because I don't know how far we've gotten down that, and that seems to be a conversation we're having today, and we probably will with the budget as well. But it's a little, I don't know that we've decided how, sure, we want to reduce gas emissions, but I don't think we've gotten very far in terms of what that's going to look like and how much priority. And it is a place where we have more levers.
Oh, fair enough. I mean, I agree with you. We haven't made the decision about how far we're willing to go on gas. I would agree with that.
And I would say that I second Commissioner Siegel's comments there. I think that we have not stood up and said we're getting out of the gas business. I view this as part of building the case of why gas is bad and how bad is gas. And I think as leading up to that more momentous decision that we're going to get out of it, this is bad and we're going to stop doing it, this helps build the case. And if we had already decided that we're getting out of the gas business in 15 years, then we don't have to spend any time building the case why gas is bad. But we haven't decided that, so I think this is a good idea.
Well, as we do our cost benefit analysis on different spending measures for, you know, reducing greenhouse gases, it does help to have this fuller view of things. So that I think that's very useful. I want to thank you again for that.
This is Lena Perkins. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to second that point that it will change the dollars per ton avoided for in-city programs versus, say, offsets. So, and I'll leave it at that.
All right. Well, we still have a very important agenda item left, is any more discussion on this one? Greg, you're off mute. Don, or nope? Don?
I mean, on the memo that accompanied this agenda item, the first sentence of the second paragraph is, if the council at the UAC's recommendation directs utilities department staff to begin internal reporting of upstream natural gas emissions for informational purposes, utility staff can accommodate that request. So if there were to be an action at this point, it would be that we should make that recommendation to council, would it not?
That would be an appropriate action. I think maybe we just come up with a figure of merit that says we need to double or whatever that is, figure the ballpark analysis of what the greenhouse gas emission is per unit of gas that we use, and just keep that in mind. I don't know that we need to direct staff to do any more. That's just my opinion, but anybody else?
Well, it's not an action item, so I don't know that we can.
Fair point. Yeah. Everybody. All right. Well, how about with the commission's permission, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the budget implications of COVID. Dean, do you want to start with that? Or?
Yes. So this is an action item that we're asking Utility Advisor Commission to take action to propose our operating in our CIP budget to council. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Yen and his team, and Lisa and Eric is also available to talk about this topic. So with that, I'll turn it over.
All right, is everyone able to see my screen and hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to get myself situated here. 1 second. So good morning, commissioners and council member. Due to the coronavirus pandemic and the temporary closure of businesses, we are navigating in uncharted territory. With the guidance of the UAC, the budget subcommittee, council, city management, and staff, I am presenting to you today the FY 2021 Utilities Proposed Operating and Capital Budget, which for your consideration, it has minimal rate increases and also has the city's commitment to provide essential utility service, safe, reliable, and environmentally sustainable. So the proposed budget that was previously published and sent to you was basically the FY21 baseline budget. It reflects the current service levels with the rate projections prior to the COVID-19 emergency proclamation. So lots have changed since then. We have withdrew a couple of position requests that we had previously thought about. One was for the utilities program services to help with electrification, to focus on that area. Another one was for engineering, electric engineering, to help with their backlog of CIPs. But instead, we're going to be freezing 5 of our current vacant positions. These are non-critical positions we consider. These are more business operational, project management positions. We can reassign tasks and defer some of these projects down the road. The ones that are critical, we are still going to be recruiting for. These are the operations and the engineering positions. So we are asking for the city manager support to continue those recruitments. And our balance reserves are actually in a very good position. So we are able to recommend 0 rate changes for most of the utilities with very minimal impacts and minimal impacts, I guess. And then also for very few reduction in services. And the ending projected reserves will still be at above minimum levels and also near or at the target reserve levels. So as I said, we have gotten feedback from the UAC, the finance committee, the subcommittee about the various rates. And thanks to Lisa Bilar and Eric Henniston, they have worked tirelessly developing all these rate scenarios, identifying what expenditure cuts we would need to accomplish these rates, and then also while maintaining our reserve levels at the targets. So thank you to them. So safety is our first priority for our utility systems. So how do we balance safety and also at the same time address or give financial relief or assistance to our community especially our businesses. So after much deliberation and discussion, the council on May, I think it was May 12th or 13th, recommended that we do not raise rates for electric, water, and wastewater, but we do raise gas 2%, even though we had previously recommended 3%. And also they thought fiber, we should continue increasing the rates for the CPI customers to continue the expansion of the fiber network.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, Mr.
Sure.
Yuan. Like I said, it was 27 hours of Zoom meetings last week. I don't recall the vote for fiber being for 2.5.
The 2.5, oops, sorry.
I
ahead.
recall it being 0, and I apologize if my memory is incorrect, but I wonder if just while you're presenting, someone else could go back and check the minutes or the report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. So yeah, I think it was a split vote, but if someone don't mind checking that.
There were many of them, but my memory, and again, I do apologize, that many hours in a row, it's hard to keep track, but my recollection is that it was 0% for fiber.
Okay, thanks.
So Councilmember McCormick, that might be my fault. Like I said, I thought that it was split, but I thought it was 2.5, but we'll check on it right now.
It was definitely split. It was definitely split.
Exactly. Okay, we'll check on it right now.
And in regards to the 2% for gas for the residential medium customer, it's about, actually from this coming year, it's going to be actually a slightly decrease or no rate change, because we are proposing a reduction in the monthly service charge of $3, and that's offset by like $1 or so increase in this distribution costs. So for most customers, I probably see no change or slight decrease. For the higher usage residential customers above 150 therms, they'll see about a $20 monthly increase. And for commercial customers, depending on their usage, the increase will be about $250 to $500, depending on the usage level. Any questions on this before I move on? Well, okay. So here's a comparison of what we had originally proposed to what was adopted or was recommended by council. So for the residential customers, there's about $50 savings, not increasing the gas rate by 5% and reducing it to only 2%, and also deferring the 2% electric increase to 0%. For the businesses, it's a little more meaningful. It ranges anywhere from $250 to $11,000 increase if we had gone with the original proposal of 5% gas and 2% electric. So I want to thank Commissioner Down here for asking for this slide to show the potential savings or cost avoidance of council and UAC's recommendations. So now I'm going to go to each individual funds, and then I'll pause after each fund, and then we can take questions. So for the electric fund, to achieve a 0% rate increase in FY 2021 without any large future increases, I think the goal is to keep rates within 5% in the next few years as well, while doing 0 rate this year and maybe next year. The electric fund would have to make some reductions. We do have a pretty healthy reserve right now, so it's not as bad as like the gas utility or the sewer utility, which we'll discuss later. We're expecting about an $18 million revenue loss. Some of this is due to a 10% load forecast decrease. So I think that's about almost a $12 million drop we're expecting if the recession, depending on the recession level. We're also, like I said, freezing some positions for the electric fund. That's 1.85 positions, which is about $400,000 in reduction costs. And we're also recommending postponing some of our underground rebuild projects that are scheduled to be rebuilt, I guess, or redone. We will be working on the design for these projects. We just won't begin construction until outer years.
Hey, Dave, excuse me, one quick question. When you say 12 million loss in the load reduction, is that after offsetting the reduction in any purchases?
No, there's a $9 million offset in purchases for that.
Okay.
So even though it says 18 million, the net is 9 million.
Thanks.
Thanks for clarifying that. And that's assuming a 10% load reduction. And finally, the other topic we're considering right now is the renewable energy credit purchases and sales of using in-state or out-of-state purchases. So here, that could potentially bring us anywhere from $3 to $6 million a year. So here's a slide from Jonathan and his team showing what the net impact would be if we were to swap in-state renewables for out-of-state renewable purchases. So the net revenue is how much we would gain every year, I guess. So over 5 years, we could gain potentially $16 million more in the electric fund that could be used towards electrification or reducing customer rates or holding it flat. These are assumed certain assumptions, like the market prices stay where they're at today, and the loads that we have currently are also what we're projecting. So it's based on load projections and also market prices for the RECs.
Dave, can I ask you one other question? How much does it also depend on the current hydro generation projections?
Yes, that's also a big factor as well. So if we have more hydro, we would buy less RECs. On a lower hydro year, we would buy more RECs, I guess. Any other question on this slide? And then the last thing is about the power content label. The California Energy Commission doesn't deem out-of-state RECs as a eligible renewable resource. So we would be below the 100% according to the CEC power content. We'd be closer to the 80% mark or 90% mark if we were to use out-of-state RECs. But overall, I don't think, even with the out-of-state RECs, we are still considered carbon neutral. I think we just have to modify our carbon neutral policy, accepting third-party RECs instead of, or third-level RECs instead of REC number ones, instead of in-state RECs.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So to restate, is it an accurate restatement of what you just said that the reported, if we were to do this REC selling that you outlined on the previous slide, that from a reporting perspective, we would go from 100% carbon free to 80% carbon free, but from an actual carbon emissions perspective over the Western US, we would be still at 100%.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So Jim and Lena are on the phone as well. Should you guys want to chime in, feel free before I move to the next slide.
Okay. Sorry, Dave, I have a comment.
Sure.
This is referencing back to my earlier comment at the beginning of the meeting. We have already in March 2020 recommended, I should say, not directed, recommended that staff and council consider selling bucket 1 RECs down to a certain level. I believe that's correct, right?
Yes, I think we are doing that as we speak.
So really what we're really talking about in slide 6,
mm-hmm.
we're kind of turning up the volume, if you will. Is that what we're doing?
We are turning up the volume, yeah, when we are kind of changing our strategy of allowing REC 3 purchases and sales.
Okay, so final and follow-up question on that. With respect to fiscal year 2021, which is obviously the concern year, given the COVID pandemic, are we, I mean, is there a time frame that we need to be aware of on this 3.8 million possibility, or is this through the end of the fiscal year 2020? What time? Is this, I guess my message is, if we say, yeah, that's a great idea, City Council, should we take a look at this? And we go to them in a month and it's already passed, or they have another 3 months to discuss this?
I think there's time. I think the only risk is the market prices of the RECs may go down in the future, or it could go up as well. So it would just be pushed out. It'll be another year, I guess. If we don't sell this year, we'll be moved out to another year.
You highlight an interesting, thank you, but you highlight an interesting point. Has the state of California relaxed its requirements for the use of in-state renewables?
Okay. If you don't mind, I'll let Jim Stack jump down in.
At this point, they have not. There was actually, before the pandemic, there was discussion of eliminating the use of out-of-state renewables completely. And right now we're allowed to meet our requirements with up to 10% of those recs, the bucket 3 recs. And there was talk before the pandemic of eliminating that as a category and requiring everything being in state, basically. But so far they haven't relaxed any requirements due to the COVID situation.
So just to reiterate, with respect to fiscal year 2021, we have until September.
Well, every month that goes by through the fiscal year, we kind of lose the opportunity to sell those recs. So that if we wait until September, we'll have lost the opportunity to sell the July and August recs and replace them with out-of-state ones and earn some of that revenue that's shown on the screen. So, you know, you could look at it that way, that every month that goes by, we lose an opportunity to sell a month's worth of recs. And we have a bunch of those available in the summer due to our solar resources producing the most during that period.
And if we, let's just say those July and August recs we didn't sell, can we keep them and sell them and again some other day, or are they gone?
Once they're generated and they come into our account, we can only sell them as bucket 3 recs. So you can only sell them as bucket 1 and get the maximum profit from them before they're generated. You have to sell them in advance. Once they enter our account, then we can only sell them as bucket 3, and we lose most of the revenue associated with them.
So I guess I'm trying to follow up on Commissioner Smith's question. What's the timing associated with adopting this plan, this strategy for fiscal year 2021? When do we have to decide? And for every month we don't decide, what do we lose? And do we lose it forever?
So to realize the entire revenue here, the $3.8 million in net revenue, we'd have to enact this in June, essentially. We could sell the July recs in June, end of June, and realize that entire revenue. I'd have to take a look at the month-by-month numbers, but if we wait, 2 months, we probably lose about $1 million worth of the possible revenue shown there. Would be my guess.
So what's the holdup
Wow.
for selling them?
So 25% we could lose if we wait 2 months.
Yeah, it's
$1 million bucks, rough round
ballpark
numbers.
estimate. Yep.
That's considerable.
So what's the holdup in selling them? What do you need from us? You need a motion from us, and then you need the city council to move forward on it?
Correct. And we'd like to have a modification to the carbon neutral plan to allow for this, because the plan shown here, the strategy shown here is in deviation from the carbon neutral plan, where we say that we'll get to 100% of our load using in-state renewables.
And is that part of the vote on this item today then?
I'll defer to Jonathan or Dave on that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know if it's agendized for today, but we could bring it back to you next month or in June.
I'm not I'm a very inexperienced UAC member. This item is on the agenda.
Mhm.
It's an agenda item for action. Why can't we make a motion to forward this to council? Is that not allowable?
I'll defer to Jonathan.
Well, maybe, I mean, we don't have the carbon neutral plan amendment specifically agendized, but there may be a way to include in the motion, if there's a recommendation for approval of the budget, that the city council pursue this exchange program, and we may be able to, I'd have to see whether we could meet the deadlines to bring the carbon neutral plan amendments back in June. I'm not confident that we could do that, given the long lead times on the report routing. But if we could do that, that motion, I think, would enable us to provide that option to council. Otherwise, we would be looking at September and the loss of that revenue.
Well, we should do everything we can to get that revenue, especially in this time. We shouldn't hold it up, right?
Is there like even a special meeting where that's the only agendized item or something? Because didn't we have that before us before? I thought we had the modification that was necessary, and then we tabled it. I can't remember the details.
Yeah, the modification was just for the surplus, sales of the surplus, not this exchange of renewables below the surplus. But I think if we were to receive direction that as part of the budget, we do everything necessary to pursue, to pursue this REC exchange proposal, we can see if we can get that carbon neutral proposal to council with the budget adoption, which gives them the opportunity to give us the approval that we need.
May I ask a quick question?
Sorry.
May I ask a quick question? Mr. Abenshine, is the gating factor here legal? Is it that legal has to go through all this stuff?
It's a variety of internal review processes. So legal is one of those.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
From my perspective, sorry, if I may, what I really like about this is that it provides the city options. It's not necessarily that we're directing council or the city or administration to go out and raise $16.8 million. What we're saying is, and I think what is profoundly important, and at a time of a revenue crisis, is we are giving an option to city council and staff to further our electrification efforts via a source of funds that we don't have to go to state, we don't have to go to the federal government. We actually already have the asset. It's just the right thing to do. That's from my perspective. This is a mechanism that already exists. The staff currently already does. They sell our existing surplus. And who's to say in a year's time when, sorry, just one final comment. In a year's time when COVID goes away, let's be optimistic. COVID goes away. All things are green. Everything's beautiful. City council has the right to say no more. That was an emergency measure done. No more. I don't think there's anything restricting that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I appreciate the comments. I'd like to get through this presentation. Is going to raise a number of issues. So let's finish going through that, some questions along the way, and then we can discuss all the issues together. Dave, you want to continue, please?
Sure. So here is a snapshot of where our reserves will be projected at the end of fiscal year 21 with a 0 rate increase. So we are just slightly below the target levels, but like I said, we are pretty healthy still with the electric fund. So this is one of the larger reserves and one of the larger utilities. So we are comfortable with this level. And then for the outlook, we will continue to maintain our services, provide customer support, and promote our energy efficiency programs. So we're not going to cut back on those. We will continue to implement the SCAP that was discussed earlier with EV chargers, small, medium business energy efficiency programs. And we'll also be launching a home energy report soon for residential customers. And for CIP, we'll be upgrading our substations and all the aging equipment that we have out there. We will still be moving forward with advanced metering infrastructure, which are the smart meters or smart grid. And finally, we're looking at the Foothills distribution rebuild project. That's the only new project we added this year. And this is part of the wildfire mitigation plan. We have 11 miles of overhead in the foothills. So we're going to see what we can do to either strengthen the equipment that's up there or underground certain parts of it if possible. So that'll be one of the studies we'll be doing this coming year. And with that, that is electric. So should I pause and take questions? Or do you want, oh, you're on mute, Michael.
Let's go through with this and then we'll come back to everything.
Okay, so in regards to the fire fund, I did get clarification. We did get a 4-3 vote approving the 2.5 CPI increase for EDF1 customers.
Okay, thank you.
There are only actually 7 customers remaining on this rate. This was a promotional rate back in 1990 to pre-2006 when we launched the dark fiber network. So most of these customers will be converting over to the EDF3 rate probably in the next 5 years. The original contract is for about 30 years. So the majority of the other customers are on EDF3, so there will be no rate impact on those customers. And our projected ending reserves for fiber is about 34 million end of fiscal year 21. Changes for fiber fund, we're going to be freezing a quarter of a position. And we're also adding some money to the fiber rebuild project in the CIP to help with expansion efforts. So we will be awarding a contract, I think in early June, to go into council for approval for Magellan Advisors to come over and help us with the design and a kind of a business case on how to expand the network to serve our to help with the AMI project, and also to strengthen our SCADA system with our switches so we can reduce outages or restore them faster. And then there's also a phase 3 and 4 of the contract, which will probably take place maybe a year and a half later, assuming council approves the first couple phases. And that will be kind of an incremental approach for fiber to the neighborhood, and maybe fiber to the premise. So that is something we're still evaluating.
So Dave, when you say that, that would just be the planning or the analysis would be a year and a half from now?
Yes, that should start, yeah. So for first phase 1, which is the analysis, is about 6 months. And then construction of phase 1 is actually phase 2. And that'll take another 6 to 9 months. And then we'll bring phase 3 to UAC and council later in a year or so to add on, I guess, to the first phases.
I want to be clear. So a year from now, you'd ask for approval to do more study?
Yes, and that study will be for fiber to the premise.
All right, I'm not happy with that, but we'll come back to that. Thanks.
And that's assuming UAC and council approves the first 2 phases too, right? It is contingent on prior approvals. And we are also looking for an incremental approach. We're not doing a big bang like we've talked previously, I think, but we can talk more about that later.
So, sorry.
Sure.
One bullet point on this causes a question. AMI collectors, are we, in fiscal year 2021, are we installing a portion of AMI?
We're actually going to be awarding contracts where the RFP is going to be closing in the middle of June. So I think we're hoping to award contracts by the beginning of 2021. I don't think we'll be doing any installation probably until 2022 at the earliest. But we're evaluating, looking for building fiber to these collector points.
Okay, so but the AMI collectors are part of the AMI rollout, or?
Yes, but the fiber is the conduit.
Fiber is like a add-on and nice to have.
Yeah, it's the connection.
Okay, thank you.
The power.
Well, maybe if I can clarify that, Commissioner Smith, that it's not an add-on nicer, it's a necessary to have, because we need to run the fiber to the collectors to actually get the information back for the billing system. So those collectors are needed in this process for AMI.
Oh, okay. So if that's the case, are we delaying AMI to fiscal year 2022?
No, we're still going to roll it out. In the fiber network expansion portion of it, the first phase is to do the high overview, construct or drawing portions of it. Phase 2 then is to build that portion of it out if council approves. And that's where the AMI collectors and the fiber, and we can expand fiber depending on how far in each of the neighborhoods once we get the design done. So we're talking about in that 9-month time frame, depending on what comes out of the high level design, that we can then at that point get to just the collectors themselves, not any further into it.
Oh, sorry, just clarification, Commissioner Smith. Were you asking about AMI or the fiber portion?
Well, actually, it's related, right?
It's related.
The AMI is part of, sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a fund for the AMI. Is that correct? We have a capital improvement fund for the AMI meters,
Yes,
correct?
that's correct. It's under the electric CIP. Yes.
It's under the electric CIP. But in order to make them operational, I think what I'm hearing is in order to make them operational, the fiber needs to be there.
There's also, you can use the third-party Wi-Fi So you don't necessarily need fiber. Fiber is
Okay.
just more robust, and
Sure.
secure. But then in term, Shiva, you want to say something?
Yeah, so we're talking about the backhaul to the collectors. The
Understood.
collector would be mounted, and it's a matter of communicating the backhauling the data back to the meter data management system. And there are three ways to get there. One is through fiber, the other is through the cellular network, primarily two. So the default is the cellular network. That's what we do currently, and we could continue to do that. So the AT&Ts of the world or the Verizon of the world would backhaul from the collectors if we didn't have any fiber. So fiber is not a prerequisite, but it provides a more robust connection. And it's either, so one collector could have a fiber backhaul, and the other collector could have a public carrier network as a backhaul.
Understood. I think my basic question is a matter of timing. If we are in a budgetarily constrained fiscal year and our AMI cannot be active, which I think I just heard it can be, then perhaps we should look at delaying the AMI rollout. But if the AMI that we're implementing can manage both cellular network as well as fiber, and the system is built for that, then I think from a priority level or programming level, I think we're okay. My initial concern was just, I didn't understand why the AMI collectors were on a bullet point for fiber in a year's time, if you will, 2 years time, actually. Thank you.
Commissioner Dan here. I do see there is a hand raised in the public. I'm not sure we're taking questions.
We're going to take that after your presentation.
Sounds good. All right, let's continue. All right, now we're talking about gas. So we are recommending a 2% gas rate increase due to the limited reserves and the amount of CIP work we have to do in the upcoming years. We will have to make a $3 million adjustment in the gas fund. So what we're proposing now is trying to reduce the linear fee for our next gas main replacement. So instead of spending $10 million on it, we're going to spend $7 million. So we'll reduce the capacity or the scope by 30%. We also will be freezing some positions in the gas fund along with the other utilities. And finally, we also considering postponing the gas meter replacement project. This was kind of an add-on to the AMI project since we're going to be replacing electric meters. We're also considering replacing all the age gas meters. Currently, we have over 12,000 gas meters that are over 30 years of age. So we were going to consider replacing some of those as well. In regards to reserves, where we'll end up with at the end of the year, we'll still be right near the target levels, even with the 2% increase. And then on the future years, actually, this is only only utility we're projecting increases for 2022. All the other reserve charts I'm showing today are assuming 2 years of zero rate increases. For the gas reserves, we're recommending 5% for the next few years, including 2022. And for outlook, so with the 2%, we will continue doing the cross-bore safety inspection program. We will continue with the PVC pipe replacement. I think we have about 15% remaining in our system, which is about 30 miles. So I think right now the current plan, if we reduce our budget to $7 million a year, the replacement time will be about 20 years with the alternating year schedule. If we did the $10 million budget a year, it would reduce the timeline to 14 years on an alternating schedule. We'll also be increasing the frequency of our citywide gas surveying. So we do contract out for this. We have surveyors doing a drive-by in the commercial areas and also doing a walk-by mobile survey looking for leaks. So I think currently in the commercial areas, we do it once a year for the commercial areas for the drive-by, and we do half the city for the walking survey. So we're going to be proposing to do the commercial one twice a year and the walking one for the entire city once a year. And the last bullet talks about the gas meter testing. So we have done some preliminary testing And some of the old meters are actually within accuracy range still. So we're going to come up with a more robust testing program to see if we can identify the meters we really have to place in this upcoming AMI project. If there's a way we can reduce the number of meter replacements and preserve them longer, we'll do that.
When you test for the accuracy, are you also testing for leakage?
I don't know that one actually. I think it's only for accuracy.
Yes, the testing portion of it for the meters themselves will actually be tested for leakages when they put it on the bench.
Oh,
okay, thanks.
Okay, I think that's it. Okay, from now we're moving on to wastewater. Unless there's any questions about gas. All right, for wastewater, we're proposing a 0% rate increase for FY 2021. We don't have as many options or levers in the wastewater plant, just in the wastewater collection fund, just because there aren't a lot of variables in there. There's no like commodity purchases or large one-time CIP projects. So we would have to reduce some of the linear footage on future sewer lateral replacement projects. Another option we'll be considering is bond financing and see if we can capture some of the rates out there if there is a recession. I think the rates we're thinking about right now, we're looking at is about 2.75. So if we could get a bond financing, maybe we could replace more of these mains in a quicker pace. Changes again, we talked about revenue loss of 719,000 and reducing the size of the sewer project. Wastewater reserves. So we are slightly below the target level. We are comfortable with this. Like I said earlier, there aren't a lot of variable costs. It's just operations and the sewer main replacements. There are no market-based costs, I guess, like the other commodities may have. And for the outlook for next year, we will be completing the 2020 cost of service study. We will continue also to assess and design future main replacements. We're actually going to be procuring a new mobile software system. This will allow the staff to actually get real-time data in the field and also connect it with our GIS system and some of our other capabilities. So we'll have a more productive work done out there. And we'll have to, I guess, reduce typing, bringing paper back and forth in the office. So it'll make us a little more efficient there. And finally, in CIPs, sewer system rehabilitation projects will continue. We are looking into buying a couple new equipments for the sewer utility. One is a closed circuit video inspection camera, and another one is a trailer flusher. It's for a pressure washer for laterals. And finally, we're going to water. We're also recommending a 0 rate increase for water. Due to delays in CIPs and no projected rate increases from SFPUC, we are not going to make any kind of reductions in the water fund. We don't need to, I guess. We will be freezing the position again. Similar to the gas meter testing, we'll be doing the same for water. We also have done some testing on older water meters. I think we have 9,000 water meters that are over 20 years of age. So we'll be testing more of those to see whether or not they need to be replaced with the AMI project or not. And the reserves are actually at the high level due to the flat costs from SFPUC and also the CIPs that we've kind of deferred. So we're able to hold rates flat for 2 years without going underneath the target. And I think I covered all this. The only thing to know, I guess, for CIP, we are moving forward with the seismic water tank replacements. These are of age now, so we will be replacing 2 or 3 in the next probably 5 or 10 years. And that is it for the presentation.
Thank you, Dave. We do have a community comment or a question from Brett Anderson, who's spoken to the commission before. So activate his line so he could speak.
Can you hear me?
You speak up a little bit, please, Brett.
All right. I'll try and speak loud. So my comment is focused on the proposal regarding relaxing our carbon-free policy to gain revenue. And so there's a couple points. This is kind of new written down.
Brett, you are hard to hear. I don't know if there's any way you can improve that.
All right, let me just quickly change.
Is that easier?
Oh, much better. Thank you.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. So this is the first time I've seen this proposal, which is basically a single option to change the carbon-free policy so that we can gain revenue. And that also implies changing our carbon, energy content, carbon content label on our energy. So up to this point, I thought that we had discussed, and I think it was back in February, three options that could gain us some incremental revenue. So there was the option to sell down to our existing load, annual load, that would get revenue. There was also an adjustment for the hourly reporting move that would also gain revenue, and that totaled to about 2.3. And then this additional max it out, go all the way to the RPS requirements of California, and which required changing our carbon-free policy, gained us an additional 1 million. So I don't know how that squares with what we were discussing or what was presented here today. And the other point was that, changing that carbon-free policy, it is a real change. There is a qualitative difference between Rec 1, Rec 3, so bundled recs with unbundled recs. A difference between, buying your energy from a California provider versus out-of-state providers. And all of this, I think, was also in the context of allocating those funds up to 100% of that revenue to electrification programs and projects, which are also kind of to be discussed. I think Jonathan deferred that discussion, but that was always kind of the understanding that all this revenue was going to be mainly for electrification projects if we were going to, make these compromises. So that's just, I think, a perspective from the public that I want to impress upon the commission here.
I appreciate that, Brett. Thank you. All right, so let's. There's a lot there, both on the offsets, on the construction and deferring of other costs. So why don't we go forward with questions and comments from my commissioners? Who'd like to start? Well, let me start with AC. You please go ahead.
Well, I think the staff's really done a good job here, in my view, of going through what they can do to kind of soften the impact of COVID on our customers. And I really appreciate the effort. And notwithstanding the comments that Brad Anderson just made, I mean, we struggled several months ago with trying to decide what the best policy would be for changing the way we dealt with RECs. And I was very comfortable with the resolution we came to, but given the current situation, I agree with what the staff is proposing now to modify the policy so that we can try to, again, further reduce the impact of this situation on our customers. And I would hope we can find a way to be able to do that as quickly as possible so that we could capture the sale of RECs beginning in July.
Thank you for that. Who else would like to? Oren Smith, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I too just want to reflect on the comment from Brett Anderson. I think I think all of us have struggled with this. To your point, in January, February, we did struggle with this, the three options, and we landed with selling down to selling 100%, to selling our surplus only, which was comfortable for everyone because we didn't change anything. If we fast forward past March 12th, when we're suddenly shelter in place and we're now 34 million Americans, if not more, are unemployed, and businesses closing and revenue falling and city continuing to need to operate. And further, we still have a goal of being, a carbon-free Palo Alto, and we still have a goal of electrifying Palo Alto. I think it makes sense for us to help the city find revenue easily and quickly to help accomplish some of our goals. And I think this is a sensible solution. And I also want to thank the staff for the exhaustive amount of work that they have done. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Lauren. Greg, you're off mute.
Yeah, I am. So I wanted to also thank the staff. I think they did a great job going through this stuff and putting it together for us. But I have some concerns on the gas utility stuff. First of all, I think some of the gas utility stuff requires direction from the city council, which I would hope they would take up. It seemed to me, frankly, that the majority of the savings, first of all, come from cutting back on, it's postponing or reducing project scope of work in the gas main PVC pipe, which is about $10 million. It was a little unclear to me, and I guess I wanted to get some sense maybe from staff. If we go with this route of in the big picture and do that, as opposed to continuing it on, and normally we would do some bond financing to take advantage of the low rates to get us through this, but staff's concerned that we're not doing the bond financing because they're concerned about the future of the utility, I assume. So I guess some of my questions are, well, how long would the bond financing be? I mean, we're not going to shut down the utility in the next 10 years. Are there safety issues with not doing it? And I actually get back to Chair Danaher's comment earlier about the really expensive things are the 100% solutions. And so, and where are we going with the gas utility? I think is something that City Council is going to have to grapple with. But I was curious if staff could talk a little bit about what the bond financing options were, because I hate to see us, not doing the cross boring, for instance, is a safety issue. I mean, all it takes is something like San Bruno, and suddenly our whole focus is different. And it's times like this that city councils and governments tend to sacrifice some of those safety improvements due to cost-cutting measures. And I just want to make sure we're not doing that. We're being prudent. And just the fact that we're sort of not sure where we're going with this is not making us do the right thing, because I don't think we're getting rid of the gas utility in 10 years. So maybe you could address that.
Sure, I can weigh on that. So both counts. Oh, you want to go first, Dean?
Yeah, if I could, real quick. So, Commissioner Sharp, so you echo a lot what we heard from the council when we made our presentation around this, and I believe that that's one of the reasons why the 2% increase was given to offset some of these costs for some of these programs. When we first went there, we talked about reducing the cross-bore and from a safety perspective. So the cross-bore project will still continue on. I think the thing is that we do have concerns around, bond financing off of the gas system. There's about 30 miles worth of PVC that's out there. Right now, the thing is that we do not see leaks in that system right at the moment, where we reduced the funding for this year's CIP by $3 million out of the $10.5 million that's in that project. It doesn't say, though, that we can't look at bond financing to move this forward. And then the other safety aspect of it is that, as Dave mentioned in there, is that we were going to add some dollars to the surveying of the gas system. Right now, like I said, we do not see the gas leaks that we've had in the past. As long as the earth doesn't move and shake, that PVC pipe is okay. And I know that that's not a real safe factor about not having the ground shake and what's going to happen with that system. But I think the thing is that we would increase our surveying portion of it, like I say, to do on a yearly basis the entire system, to drive it out, to actually do the walking survey portions of it in all the residential areas as well as where we're going to be in the commercial side. Now, all the commercial side doesn't have any PVC. It's all high pressure main, but still, I think that we owe it to ourselves to make sure that the system is safe. And then in the cutbacks, I guess where I felt is that I do not want to drain the reserves. It's easy to take the $3 million out of the reserves right now and then, be below the minimum line portion of it. And that was not something that I had asked staff to look at. One of the things that I believe that we need to be at is that I've asked staff to look at through all the reserve funding portions of it to be right around 70 days, 75 days. Targets are at 90 days. I do not want to put us in a position where we are going to be in next year coming around is that we're going to be well below where our reserves are going to be at. We had to look at some of these other cuts. But I think the thing is, your question is well taken, is that we do need to look at possibly what that bond financing would look like for taking out the rest of this PVC that's in the system.
Okay, great. Now that's helpful to know. And then the only other comment and I agree with you on the reserves, by the way. I wasn't implying we should go through our reserves. Is getting rid of the offset program. I think that would be a mistake. I think what we really need to do is decide if we are saying we're carbon neutral. We can't say that if we get rid of the offset program. I think that's a step backwards. And I think we haven't been defending our offset program enough, frankly. I think the comments on, the community, and I agree with Chair Danaher. I think the community wants to be carbon neutral. And certain people think that's not good enough, but I don't think people want to go backwards on that. And so I guess I would ask, what are the other options besides getting rid of that?
Well, I guess then the other option is that we take that 1.5 out of reserves, or we look at, are we going to cut back further on the CIP for another $1.5 million? Because those dollars have to be allocated somewhere.
Right.
And do we look at, some of the other programs that we have, or like I said, do we take it out of the reserves? And that would be, I think, would be something that I would ask the commission to make a recommendation forward to as we go forward to council.
So Dean, since you were talking about bond financing, explain to us a little bit more of that. So we haven't encountered that since I've been on the commission. Does it have to be done by each utility separately, or can it be done by the utility department as a whole? And secondly, what's the timing and process for doing that?
I can speak to that, Dean, if you want. It could be with multiple utilities. It doesn't have to be primarily the utility you're financing for. It just shows that you have financial backing from the city. And then in regards to timing, it takes about 3 to 4 months, I guess, to put one together, is what I heard from our treasury person. So we can start evaluating it and see what the costs are and what the savings may be. I think Jonathan could speak more about the savings and the repayment of the debt. Sometimes it is not worthwhile just because of the cost of paying the fees. But maybe right now, maybe the timing is right. I guess we'll have to evaluate that.
Yeah, there's a lot to evaluate here. And generally the minimum that you're going to want to issue is, minimum is 5 million, but we really ought to be looking at something more like 10 million to issue. And so what you do is you put something together that crossed multiple utilities, but each utility has to pay back its own individual share of the debt service. So you do have to make those judgment calls ahead of time to some extent.
Okay, so benefit the others. I've had discussions with Dean and Jonathan about, and we've mentioned it in past meetings, potentially construction costs are going to decline quite a bit because of the recession we're entering. And that may be a time to accelerate construction. Is one of the few opportunities to save costs for our system. Bond financing is a good way to do that. So I think we ought to be looking very hard at the bond financing, and that doesn't mean slowing down the other programs. It may mean accelerating them on the cross-bore or fiber to the premise or otherwise. We'll talk later, of course, about agenda items for the next meeting, but I think this has to be a big part of the budget process for this. And by the way, I'm speaking out of turn, but I 100% agree with Greg that it would be a big negative to eliminate the offset program to, for Palo Alto to send a message that budget shortfalls means that we're going to backtrack on the environmental goals. I'd be against that.
Can I ask one more question on the bond financing? I know we have a little bit of current debt. Can we if we did a financing, can you use it to pay off existing debt as one purpose?
I think
We
have.
could.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you
go ahead, Dave. No.
I think we could refinance it and get a better rate for what we have currently. But I don't know if we can bond finance a new one and repay the old one though. That I have to look into. I'm not sure on that one.
Or either way, if money's cheaper now, that might be a place to.
Yes, that's something we're also evaluating, is refinancing our current bonds.
I did have a couple other comments. Just in terms of looking for money, first of all, let's say, it's never fun to have to cut budgets, and I appreciate all the effort and the many days that City Council has spent on it. It's hard. In terms of looking for other money, one thing I noticed that was across the different utilities is that the utility itself pays for a portion of customer connections. And I'm wondering why that is, and is there any money to look for there? Well, we'll start with that.
Dean, you want to take that?
So that basically, it's a revenue neutral portion. We still do charge those customers a connection fee on if it's a new if it's a new connection to a new building or a resident or whatever that case may be, depending on whatever that cost is. Even though that we fund it up front so that we can get the work done, but that we actually collect those dollars back.
Is it all collected back? Because that's not how I read it. But if that's the case, then I
parts of it, I think it's enhancement to our own system. So that part, we bear those costs.
Right.
So while we're in there doing the trenching for the customer, if we're doing like enhancements or adding capacity for other reasons, then we'll pay for that share of the cost.
Okay, thanks.
It's like 75-25 split.
Okay. Yep. Great, thanks. And then just a little nit on the cross-bore program. When we talked about it last time, I don't think we had made any changes in our construction requirements to avoid cross-bore problems in the future, at least on a permitting side. And so I just wanted to circle back to see if that has changed so that we don't have to fund another cross-bore program down the road.
No, our since we were aware of this some years ago, we actually changed our process for the construction. So when our internal crews do any kind of boring of a new service, as we just talked about, before they introduce any gas to the building or to the resident, they have to video camera that sewer line to make sure that it wasn't bored into, as well as on all the CIPs that we replace our services, the contractor has to prove to us and take video to show to us that there is no cross-bore that happened to that sewer line.
Okay, so there is a process for new construction to have to avoid it.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. Then a couple other, I wanted to emphasize, as we're in a new world, I think the idea of fiber to the premises has taken a lot of precedent or priority. And as we are looking at ways to cut carbon, and we're talking about working from home as, at least that was a comment from a lot of community members. I think that the fiber to the premises becomes more important, and not just a nice to have, but it could actually be part of a carbon reduction program for the city. And I don't think we've ever really thought about it that way in the past, but in these new times, I would love to start putting that on the table in that context as well.
For that one, as part of the new study we're bringing on, we're going to be looking at a cross-utility approach, seeing if we can bring fiber, undergrounding, and even electrification, all combining them into one bundled package for neighborhoods or whoever. So we are evaluating that to see if there's any interest in the community if we combine multiple projects together.
Great. And then I don't know that you know yet, but do you have any update on how many customers have asked for any kind of rate assistance or deferral in payment or any of the other programs that you talked about, Dean, at the beginning? You mentioned them, but I don't think you mentioned how many customers have taken advantage of them.
I think there's been some applicants, but not a lot of them have been approved. I think it's because of this. They didn't have complete paperwork. There's been an uptake, but there hasn't been as high as we expected so far. There's been a lot more calls about payment arrangements, but for those folks, we told them not to worry about it until we call off the emergency. And then at that time, we can find out what their outstanding bill is and then make the payment arrangement based on their total balance due. Another positive thing is Project Pledge. We have gotten more donations now from the community and from people who've moved out. So they have like remaining deposits. They are contributing that to Project Pledge. So we have seen also an uptick on there as well. And finally, deferral was deferrals, or was it back pays? We haven't seen too much. It's a little uptick, but not too much. I think we've actually seen less past due bills with my CPAL now, just because now customers are getting notifications in advance that their bill is due. So we actually have seen a significant drop in the number of past due bills.
And do we expect that to continue, or do we not know?
We expect that to continue.
Okay.
Or the past due that's gone up is more on the commercial side, not the residential. But it hasn't been significant.
Okay. And then the last thing I would just reiterate about offsets, that I think it would be good to maybe look another place to get that $1.5 million and not undo that program right now.
Maybe just to take that one point, just get a quick survey from the commissioners. How many would oppose removing the offsets and how many would endorse removing the offsets? So I see Greg indicate he would oppose. Don Jackson, how about you?
I would oppose removing the offsets on gas.
Right. Lisa and I already spoke. AC?
If we can find the money elsewhere, I'm happy to keep the offset program. We did work hard to get that in place.
Okay. Lauren Smith?
I would prefer that we keep the offset in place, but I would also prefer that we find the $1.5 million in the sale of Bucket 1 Rex.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to get to that one in a bit too. Lisa Forcell.
Yeah, I also think it would be a shame to undo the gas offset program. I think it's
okay.
It will be very, very difficult for customers to follow the logic.
All right. All right, thank you. So that's one piece of guidance the commission can pass on to staff on that. I'm gonna get around to the bucket Rex in a moment. Secondly, several people, including me, have spoken about bond financing and using that as a way to finance CIP, perhaps even accelerate that, and perhaps even accelerate fiber to the premise. They're looking to doing that. Can we just have some quick responses or reactions to that set of issues from folks? AC?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I hadn't thought much about it before the discussion, but being able to accelerate CIP projects, particularly fiber to premises, by using bond financing in a time when money's cheap and hopefully construction costs are coming down makes a lot of sense.
Okay, Lauren Siegel?
Same.
Okay, Don Jackson?
I'm very receptive to bond measures for capital improvement programs in general.
Okay, Greg Scharf.
Yeah, no, I also am receptive to it. Yeah, I'm receptive to it. I think especially on the phase 1 and the phase 2 of the fiber to the premises. I mean, phase 3 and phase 4, I want to see sort of how phase 1, phase 2 go.
All right, Lauren Smith.
I'm in favor of bond measures. One thing that I just want to highlight, though, is that with nobody traveling on the roads, most of the organizations that are in my industry building who are most busy right now are the civil infrastructure contractors, and they are very busy. So I'm not as optimistic that we're going to see a price drop on major civil infrastructure works, but bond financing is a very real possibility.
Okay, and Lisa Forsell.
Yeah, I likewise am very interested in bond financing.
Okay.
Especially to keep up with the CIP projects that had already been identified as necessary for safety and maintenance. I mean, I guess we're not looking to eliminate those, but there's a little bit of a gray area around capital improvement projects. And just to your question, yes, bond finding seems like a good thing to pursue.
Okay, so Dean, for one of the next meetings, good if we could dive into that topic a little bit more, but also, and this gets to Lauren Smith's comment, a little more on the process for timing and when you do RFPs, when you get responses, when you start getting feedback on market rates for different projects. As I know there's a time lag on that, and maybe we're right or maybe we're wrong about costs going down, but if we could dive into that at a future UAC meeting would be great. Let me go on to the last topic that generated a lot of discussion, which is selling off more of our bucket 1 RECs and buying bucket 3 RECs down to enough to meet our state requirements, but less than our full load. And Lauren Smith and Don Jackson, you've both expressed your views on that pretty strongly, and especially in view of the financial situation. So let's get reaction. Lauren, were you waving your hand? No. Reaction from the other commissioners on this. And Greg, I know you've been involved in a lot of discussions of that topic when you were on the council and in other forums, and so you may have more sensitivities or a feel for the situation than some of us. I want to hear your views too.
I think given where we are on the finances, I think that makes sense to do it. I mean, I'm comfortable with doing it. I was comfortable with our position before. I was more comfortable with that position, but I do think that given where the finances are, I think we should move quickly and sell those RECs. We can always reevaluate later, but I think at the moment we should do that.
Lisa Forsell?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in on that as well, that, it's important to me to not just frame it as selling bucket 1 RECs. We're replacing them with bucket 3 RECs. And, all of our previous discussions grappling with the quality of various kinds of RECs, I think where the commission landed was that bucket 3 RECs are legitimate carbon reducing entities. So, and, given the potential revenue and given where the utility is at, it certainly seems like the appropriate thing to do at this time.
All right.
I'm just going to briefly comment on. I think actually, you know what? I'll stop there.
Okay. AC?
Yeah, I agree. It took me a while to get comfortable with the idea of replacing bucket 1 RECs with bucket 3 RECs, but I got there. And I think now, given the situation, it makes sense to go further as the staff is proposing, with the hope that we would get back to a situation where we were maybe looking more at the bucket 1 RECs to cover at least our load.
I want to ask Lauren Siegel's view, but Dean, you wanted to speak up.
So I understand where the commission wants to go with this, is that, to go to council with this, change our policy portion of it. But I can tell you that it's not going to happen in June. Council, because the thing is that I truly believe this has to be an action item that's going to go to council. Council's going to have to discuss this portion of it. And as we've had numerous conversations over the numerous months about this, I think that there has to be some education from the council's perspective and understanding where they're going to go and that we're going to be below. Technically, yes, we are going to be carbon neutral, but again, we're not going to be from a state perspective. So the thing is that then also the council actually goes on break in July. And so the timing around this is not going to happen until August, September timeframe. So I just want to be clear with the commission that we'll do whatever we can to speed this process up, but it's not going to happen in the June timeframe.
All right, thank you, Dean. It's helpful. Lauren Siegel.
Yeah, that's helpful to know. I'm comfortable as well, given where we are in the circumstances, and I'm generally comfortable with replacing the bucket 1 with bucket 3 Rex. I'm more with AC that I don't know. I don't want this to become the new panacea for some revenue that the budget is looking for down the road. And I do have a little bit of concern about the dollars, given that it's very dependent on water. So if we have a drought year, we're not gonna have the same kind of revenue, but I'm for it for now.
All right, thank you. Those are some of the key points that came out of the budget discussion. Is there any other?
Chair Danaher?
Yes, please.
Chair Danaher? I think Councilmember McCormick would like to speak.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, Allison,
Sorry.
please.
No worries. Have you completed your comments, Chair Danaher? You're getting close
Yes.
to a vote? Okay.
Yes.
The first thing I want to do is I just want to acknowledge how rapidly the environment has changed. At our last meeting, we were on the 2nd version of the rates, and the version you're looking at today is the 5th. So I know that's not comfortable for any of us. It's not comfortable for staff who's used to decades long time horizons. It's not comfortable for commissioners who are used to spending, extraordinary amounts of time deep in the details. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that if you feel a little bit whipsawed and things are changing, that's how we all feel. The second thing I want to say is that I think on an overall basis, we are making an appropriate use of reserves. And of course, we can get into the details of how many days and which part, the red line is between the green and the bottom. But I do think in general, we're making an appropriate use of reserves. With respect to gas being at 2% instead of 3%, we pushed Director Batchelor pretty hard on this. And he begrudgingly said that he could do the PVC pipe and the crossbore at 2%. So I don't think we are taking any chances there. You correct me if I'm wrong, Dean.
Sorry. Yes, no, exactly.
Okay. So I don't want anybody to be left with the belief that we're skating somehow in the gas utility with respect to safety. What we're doing is pushing as hard as we can to lower rates while still maintaining the safety we all know we need. And then just because there's all this discussion about the Rex, let me ask, thank you, Jonathan is appearing just as I need him, Mr. Abendschein. Are there restrictions on what the city could use the money that is raised from that sale for? Because what I don't want to have anybody happen is head out and say we can solve 10% of the city's revenue problem if we just make this change, this technical change. So can you remind us what the restrictions are on how that money can be used if it's raised?
Sorry, so there are no specific restrictions on that use of funds unless the council establishes restrictions. When we originally talked about this back in earlier this year, we were talking about trying to sequester some of these funds in a local decarbonization reserve. Now the situation has changed and we're looking for funds to avoid the decrease in reserves. And so I'll just say the only restrictions are what the council puts on those.
Okay, well, let's be more clear. It has to be spent in the electric fund. It can be transferred to the general fund. Like,
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. There's some sort of implicit assumptions in my answer there. Yes.
Let's get those
funds-
out on the table so
Funds
everybody's
associated with the
clear.
electric utility may only be used within the electric utility.
Okay, so that's the main point. I just want everybody to understand, and anybody listening, is that it's not like we can raise this money and then go spend it on firefighters or libraries or teen programs. Okay, all right, so thanks so much. And you know, I'm just going to take this opportunity. I think our budget is cutting our board and commission recognition event, although we've all offered to like make cookies and get together at some point in the future. So there won't be any items, and there certainly won't be any catering. But I think this meeting is a reflection of how valuable your service is. I just want to express my appreciation.
Oh, well, thank you for the kind comments on that. The agenda item was listed as staff recommendation, utility UAC recommend the city council adopt the proposed operating and capital budgets. And really what we had is a discussion of different factors in that. I would say there's general support for that budget, except for removing the offset on the gas. And Dean, if we left you with that, or if we put that in the form of a resolution, or what would be helpful to you?
Well, I think that we all understand that that part is very important. So, you know, we will go back and make some adjustments and find that $1.5 million within the budget. If you adopt it that way, then we'll make that change, and then we'll take that forward to the council.
I think we should take a formal vote, frankly, with our amendment.
I agree.
And then
So I think, can we articulate what the amendment is? Can someone write it down?
Well, there's the part that we recommend that we approve the proposed FY 2021 utilities operating budget and capital budget, but that we do not end the city's carbon neutral gas carbon offset program, and that money be found somewhere else.
May I also ask, is it necessary, owing to, or giving due credit to Dean and the timing associated, as much as we may be missing the solar credits for May, June, July, and potentially August, we still have a potential for bucket one recs later. Is it necessary to raise a motion for that, for that discussion to take place? Is that, I guess I'm asking Dean, do you need a motion from the UAC to say, we have considered again the bucket one, bucket three recs, and we would like us, our community and the council, to take a view and have a further discussion on this topic? Is that necessary?
I thought you were going to say the opposite. I thought you were going to say we should also have an amendment that says sell the bucket one recs and offset and buy bucket three recs.
Thank you, Greg, because that's really what I am looking for.
Well, that's what we should say.
Okay.
That's our recommendation to council. They can do what they want with it.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
I get.
Please, Dean.
Oh, sorry. So I was thinking that we're going to have to take back, you know, the carbon policy, and we're going to have to adopt that, rechange that portion of it. And so that's where that'll also go. But this is fine. We can actually add this amendment to the recommendations in the budget. But like I said, when we go back, we'll actually have to make the recommendation that the UAC recommends to council on this.
Right, yeah, so that's implicit in the budget there already.
Right.
So perhaps the resolution would be that the UAC recommends approval of the operating budget and the capital budget as proposed, including the proposal to sell bucket one recs and buy bucket three recs to the extent permitted by the state of California, but excluding but maintaining the offset program for the natural gas utility.
That sounds good.
Agree.
Is there a motion in
seconded.
favor? All right. Warren, I'll take that as a motion. Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor? AC,
Aye, I vote aye.
Lauren Siegel,
Aye.
Don Jackson,
Yes.
Greg Scharf,
Yes.
Lauren Smith,
Yes.
Lisa Forcell,
Yes.
and Danaher, yes. All right. Well, thank you. Really appreciate everybody's input on that. Our last agenda item is topics for future discussion. So we've already identified one of those, which is Dean, to learn more about the bonds and the timing for kicking off CIP programs, getting feedback on market rates and so forth. It's something educational for us and how we do planning on that. One other one that I wanted to put, and then I want to ask other people's recommendations is, or ask the commission, I'm a little perturbed that we wouldn't really be planning on fiber to the premise. We wouldn't start the planning process till a year and a half from now. There'd have to be an RFP for that, and then it would take a long time. And both because of this transition to more work at home, because of the impact on greenhouse gases, because construction rates, year and a half, 2 years from now, maybe lower. I'm wondering if it's feasible to step up the planning for that. And or at any rate, should we have an overview of where we stand in potential calendars for that project and other topics, including, on-bill payment and letting people pay for their own connection. So that's just a question for commissioners. Is that something you'd like to see on a near-term agenda?
If I may, a little bit of history and context. One of the reasons why I'm absolutely thrilled to be part of this commission is because I started at the CAC, which dealt primarily with the fiber to the premise discussion. As much as I'm very proud of the steps that have been taken over the last 3 years with respect to getting us to that measure, I think what's interesting about the current pandemic is it has highlighted how much we are not using the assets in our wheelhouse. And I'll point to the schools in general. The schools have fiber in the premise currently, but for those of us with students in Palo Alto School District, we had an incredible opportunity to exercise that asset and use that asset, and we couldn't, and we didn't. I think this just, quite frankly, brings into stark relief the fact that we've got 40 miles worth of fiber, and we can do so much more if we just step it up a little bit more.
All right, thank you. Lisa, you're off mute, but what are you going to say?
Oh, sorry. I was going to, if we're back to potential future topics.
Yes.
I didn't have anything to say about fiber, but well, given the discussion about leak natural gas, I'm wondering if we want to bring it back as an agenda item to make a formal recommendation to council to consider leakage in our internal greenhouse gas inventory.
All right, other comments on that and other topics people would like to see? Don Jackson,
Yes.
please.
So what Lisa said, yes, let's do that. Let's bring that back as a formal agenda item. And regarding your question about, or inquiry about talking about fiber to the premises sooner versus later, yes, that's a topic near and dear to my heart. I would welcome the opportunity to talk about that as an agenda item whenever we can.
All right, Greg Scharf, you're next.
I would like to have the big discussion about the SCAP offsets, the future of the gas utility, what our goals are in terms of electrification, and have that discussion. I mean, I think we need to push back and say that offsets are a fair way to deal with greenhouse gas emissions in the gas utility. And if they're not, we need to understand that and then figure out where we are in the community and what we're doing with that. I just think it's a big discussion we should have, and that we can also then talk about what really are our goals for electrification in terms of percentages and what programs we're offering. And that I don't think we've really dealt with that. And I think that would tie into the issue of the leakage. But, I think that we should look at this a little more holistically and have a path forward where we're going and how we're thinking about it, so we can think thoughtfully about it and make recommendations to the city council on the future of the gas utility.
Those are good points. We're going to be seeing a report to be done this summer that will give us more details on that, including the costs and contributions of different elements of that. So perhaps once we see that report, we'll be positioned to have that conversation.
So I think the discussion is more than one discussion. So I think we could have a discussion regarding offsets and that kind of stuff and possibly start it, or we can have it after the report comes out. But I don't think it's probably a one meeting discussion. I think it'd be a bit of an iterative process for us.
Fair point. Lauren Siegel.
I would second Greg's comments about the big picture. And then on that, I would also like to understand this you're talking about in terms of where does the city or the utility have actual controls, and where are we limited just by either incentivizing or marketing promotional type of programs, and where besides, like a reach code, are there other mechanisms we have for behavior change?
Okay.
May I share a couple of potential activities that are happening over the summer that might sort of affect the timing for this? So on June 8th, we're going to bring the amended goals and key actions, and I think that some of the things we're likely to propose are going to really help this discussion a little bit. So there might be an opportunity to have a second discussion over the summer just to talk about the implications of some of those goals and key actions. AECom will be completing its analysis over the summer, so we'll be coming back in the late summer to talk about that item. And then we're also looking at trying to get some understanding over the summer, do some really preliminary analyses of the impacts of rapid decarbonization on the gas utility. So there might be an opportunity to have some discussions about that as well. So I think probably late summer, maybe August or September would be a really good time for that discussion if it works for the commission.
Could I throw maybe they're part of that, Jonathan, but two other items that came up, I think, from some of the community comments, which haven't come up today anyway, was microgrids and, or like sort of small communities, pockets, streets, whatever, of microgrids, and also individual home batteries or using electric vehicles as backup of electricity.
So we'll be coming to you folks in August with our, every 3 years, we need to evaluate our position on investing more in storage in the community. And so I think we'll be able to speak to that to some extent. I'll also reach out to Debbie Lloyd, our acting assistant director of engineering, who has done a lot of work on resiliency and may have something additional to talk about there.
All right, AC, please.
I agree with the additions to our already full plate that others have suggested, and I really don't have any additional ones to add.
Okay. So I noticed that in June, we have a lot already on the calendar relating to water. Water supply reliability, benchmarking, logistics. There's also an item on the AMI system, customer benefit security, and Western-based resource contract decision. Dean, were you still contemplating those that remain on the agenda for June?
Yeah, those are still on for the agenda for June.
Okay, so we'll have pretty full agenda, perhaps because it affects the budget decisions and longer term planning. Maybe we hear more about the bonds and CIP process, contracting process, and timelines, and that we do need more discussion of the SCAP, gas emissions and leaks, Greg's point, offsets and electrification. But because June is crowded and because we're going to be getting that ACOM report, perhaps putting that off for a meeting after we have that report would make sense. People can disagree with me if they'd like. And then I think, Dean, you tell us when it's feasible, but a meeting where we have time to do more of a deep dive into the FTTP process and options would be good.
So I guess here's the question is that, we're going down this path and we're going to go ahead and we're going in this coming month to first part of the month to go to you or to the council to get an approval to work with Magellan, who was the ones that answered to the RFP that we put out to do phase 1. So I guess the question is that if we're going to go down this road where we're going to look at something else other than what we already put the plan together that's gone through to the UAC as well as to council, I'm not sure if we're going to get it done any faster at this period of time, because then we're going to have to put a whole new RFP back out. And this company that got the bid is very capable of doing the high overview, which will take about 6 to 9 months, maybe a little quicker, to get the high end of a design done. At that point, then in phase 2 is to go back to council, get approval, and then also then start on some of the construction portion of it, like out to the AMI and that. I guess the thing is that if we're going to redo this, I'm not sure if it's going to make it any faster or if we're going to try to streamline this process.
Well, why are we going to redo it?
Well, I guess I heard that we want to move faster on building the system in the meeting today.
No, I think you would go forward with the RFP and get Magellan going, but I'd like to hear, it's been a year or more since we had any detailed discussion of fiber to the premise. The world has changed. Let's put that back on the agenda and see what new ideas have surfaced on that.
Okay,
I don't want to slow down the Magellan process in the meantime.
Yeah, I wanted to say I didn't want to slow down the current process or interfere with it in any way.
Yeah, we might be able to bring Magellan in for one of these meetings and have them kind of give us their approach. And then you guys can give them feedback as well.
All right, Don Jackson.
Cases.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
Yes, my understanding of the current process is that the phase 1 is planning the fiber expansion in support of the utilities requirements. Phase 2 is the implementation of that plan. Phase 3 is the plan for fiber to the premise, and phase 4 is implementation of that plan. So we don't want to slow down the phases 1 and 2. You guys selected these guys and you want to go forward, go on that. But I think that the decision to plan and certainly the decision to implement phases 3 and 4 are going to be much bigger decisions for council and UAC than let's just improve the fiber for our utilities program, which, I mean, that's a no-brainer. We're going to do it. So I think in support of Chairman Danaher's comments, I think we should be socializing the thinking behind fiber to the premises, which has never, in my opinion, it needs a lot of thought and justification, and it's going to take some time for everybody to get there. So the sooner we start that conversation, not to slow down phases 1 and 2, but in terms of preparations for phases 3 and 4, I think that's what we should get on board with that.
All right. Thank you.
And by the way, Dean, that not a presentation requires a lot of staff time, but we do need to maybe identify the big decisions that would need to be made, what to do, who pays, that sort of thing, bond financing, et cetera, and just have Don was right, socialize the issues so we can start thinking about it better and maybe in July and August or something on that. But I think we have enough on the June calendar.
Yeah.
Greg, you're off mute. Did you have something to add?
No, I just didn't want to slow it down.
Okay, good. Any further comments on the future calendar? And Allison Cormack, anything from the council you would want us to add on that, or?
No, no, I think, nope, I think it's all well covered. Thank you.
Okay, great. Dean, Jonathan, Dave, and the rest of the staff, thank you so much for all the work that went into this. Really interesting, important discussion topics today, and I enjoyed it. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. I see
Second.
Lauren seconding. All in favor? We won't do a roll call for this one. All in favor, raise your hands.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Good to
Thank
see you all
you.
Thanks
today.
very much.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.